such a reverberant room.
Okay. Good evening. If everyone could please take a seat, we're going to get started. If you are standing, please sit down. Whoops. Everyone, Donna, come on. Good evening. Please sit down. Put your hand in the air if there's an empty seat next to you. Okay. Raise your hand if there is an empty seat next to you so someone can take it. Okay. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the very first public hearing of the SoHo NoHo Working Group and the first in-person Community Board 2 meeting since early March 2020. So we have a full house tonight, so thank you everyone. If you have a conversation, please take it outside and come back. There are restrooms in the back if anyone needs them. There's an elevator on the back Houston Street side if anyone needs to exit with assistance. From that, let me take you through the evening. My name is Janine Kiley. I'm the chair of Community Board 2. I'll give a few opening remarks. Then we'll go over the rules of the evening, introduce the Department of City Planning team. We'll hear a presentation from City Planning about the SoHo NoHo rezoning plan, and then take a few questions from the Community Board Working Group, and then turn it over to the public for public testimony and questions. So let me just start with saying thank you for coming and bearing with us. We're asking if you're in the audience to wear a mask. If you're speaking, you are welcome to take off your mask while you're speaking, and then please put it back on. In terms of this rezoning, I just want to highlight what we shared at last month's Community Board meeting, that the city has failed to give Community Board 2 timely notification as required with the 2019 Charter Amendment, including... You can't hear me? Can we turn up the microphones in the back of the room? Because they're pretty loud in the front, right? Okay.
So the problem is that if there's anybody talking in the back, you can't hear what's going on up here.
Okay.
So,
no talking.
no talking in the back.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to start over again. I just want to share that our community boards, that the city has failed to give Community Board 2 timely notification as required with the 2019 Charter Amendment, including full information on the SoHo NoHo rezoning plan 30 days prior to Department of City Planning certification. The final scope of work, for those of you who have downloaded it or printed it or read it, is more than 1,600 pages. The main draft environmental impact statement is almost 800 pages, with appendices totaling more than 16,000 pages for volunteers to review. This is a 100% volunteer community board. This has damaged Community Board 2's ability to create the most robust, comprehensive, and accurate response that this important plan requires. We will, however, craft as strong a resolution as we can, despite the harm done by the lack of proper and full information in the time frame required, since not doing so would leave Community Board 2 and the community in this room and the broader community voiceless on this vitally important issue. So thank you. I want to quickly introduce the elected official staffers who are here tonight. We have from Councilmember Chin's office, Anthony Drummond, her Director of Land Use. We have from Senator Hoylman's office, we have Tevin Williams. From BP Brewer's office, we have Andrew Chang and a full staff of people who helped put on this event tonight. And Charlie Anderson from Assemblymember Glick's office. I want to give a special thanks to Ji He, who with Beta NYC, who has taken care of all the technology and the planning for tonight, as well as to Bob Gormley, the district manager for Community Board 2, who has worked with the Borough President's office to pull this together. At this point, I want to turn it over to Anita Brandt. She is the chair of the SoHo NoHo Working Group, and we'll take it from here. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. First, I want to introduce the committee, the working group. Could you raise your hand, committee? I see Frederica Siegel, Carter Booth, Akila, thank you, Eugene Yu, Michael Levine, and Anthony Wong. Thank you for being here. We're going to need to sort of move at a fast pace, if you will, not rushing any speakers, but nevertheless, in order to get through the number of speaker cards that we have received. Initially, after the DCP makes their presentation, the committee can ask a few concise questions, and then we will quickly get to the public hearing part of this. It is a hearing, so let's all remember to listen to each other. We're all grown-ups, and we don't want to deteriorate into anything that would waste time. I hope you've all signed up. You do have to turn in that piece of paper in order to speak. And I would suggest that anyone who has additional testimony that they would like us to read and submit, please send it to the SoHo NoHo at CB2. Oh, who does that?
G, can you move
Oh,
it
I'm
to the
sorry,
next
I
slide,
thought it was
please?
up. Well, nothing earth-shattering there. The SoHo NoHo at cb2manhattan.org. Our next meeting is June 24th, which is tomorrow night. Especially if you chose not to stay to speak, you can always speak on the Zoom if you are so inclined. There is a registration link at the bottom here, and I believe that would be on our website as well. So at this point, I would like to, I think they can read this at their own.
Next slide, please. Sorry, just, we have to put it up so they can read. Okay. Okay, so we can just turn it over.
Yeah, you can read this at your own. It's basically be brief and concise. And in fact, if everyone said everything that you wanted to say, you can just stand up and say, I agree or disagree, or I'm for or against. You know, we don't all have to have long speeches or statements. We will stick to the 2 minutes, and they go by very quickly, so be well aware. And is there a next slide? That's it?
That's it.
At this point, I'd like to introduce Edith Hsu Chen, who is the Manhattan Director of the Department of City Planning. Please.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Janine. Hello, good evening, everyone. What an amazing turnout. I don't think that mic's on.
Is there a button?
Just a moment, please.
Okay, try again.
Is that better?
Try that mic again. Yeah. Yeah, try the mic again, sorry.
All right. Oh, there we go. Is that better? Okay. Again, I was saying, this is an incredibly impressive turnout. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on this beautiful summer evening. My name is Edith Hsu Chen. Thank you, Anita. I am the director of the Manhattan office at the Department of City Planning. We want to thank CB2 for holding this meeting on this very important neighborhood initiative, the SoHo NoHo Neighborhood Plan. Tonight is a major, major event, certainly, of course, because we're here with the community, at the community board, at their public hearing, to hear your opinion, your input, your questions. It's also a very major event because for many of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, this may be the first in-person, indoor public meeting that we've attended, right, in 15 months. So congratulations to Community Board 2 and the SoHo, NoHo Working Group for holding this meeting. I'm joined tonight by several of my colleagues at the city. We have, of course, Sylvia Lee, who many of you know from many, many meetings and public info sessions. She's the project manager, and she will be leading us through a presentation on the rezoning, on the proposed neighborhood plan. I'm also joined by Melissa Grace, John Mangin, Lara Merida, Matthew Petrus, Annie White, Scott Williamson, Josh Simino from the city planning. And from Housing Preservation and Development, we're joined by Michael Sandler, Ahmed Tagani, Eddie Almonte, Joan Huang, and Felipe Cortez. And from the Mayor's Office, we have Anne-Marie Gray, Andrew Kunis. So I see many familiar faces. I see many familiar faces, and I see many new faces. Whether you have been with us for years, or this is your first engagement with city planning, we're so glad you are here tonight. And again, we look forward to hearing your comments and your questions. So without further ado, let me turn the mic to my colleague, Sylvia Lee. Thank you. And I just want.
Thank you, Edith. Is it difficult to hear me from here? Okay. All right. Okay. Is this better?
Just give us a little bit of patience. Thank you.
I can use that. Okay. Is this better? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us, and let's hope that I don't fall on my face here. I'm tripping over. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to Edith for the introduction. My name is Sylvia Lee. I'm a planner at the Department of City Planning. First of all, thanks Community Board 2 for having me, and I will move through the presentation quickly so that you all can participate in this hearing. I think the goal really is to facilitate the Community Board 2's review and you all's review of the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan. We understand, there's a lot of information out there, there are a lot of documents, so hopefully this presentation will give you a concise overview of the entire thing. So at a glance, I will say that at a high level, the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan is intended to expand housing opportunities, support the arts in new ways, strengthen the mixed use and support economic development for the local community as well as our city, introduce, kind of shape new development in ways that are responsive to the existing historic context. And along the way, we want to continue the conversation with the community as well as our sister agencies to introduce strategies to improve quality of life. We know that that's a big concern. I will want to make sure that those issues are addressed as part of the ULURP process. And I think that this is the agenda. I will move through the background very quickly. I know that many of you have participated in past meetings. But just to, for those who are less familiar, to start, some background on the SoHo NoHo neighborhoods, and the impetus for the neighborhood plan. Obviously, you're all familiar with the location of the area. It is, centrally located, very accessible by transit. It is also an area that, wow, it's so loud. I will try to speak a little more, loudly and clearly as much as I can. Thank you for bearing with me. So SoHo NoHo are accessible by transit next to major institutions. As you can see on this slide, there are 10 subway lines and stations around and within SoHo NoHo. It is a major destination. It's really dynamically mixed use. People are here to shop, to visit, as well as admiring the iconic architecture that we all love and know. And then, I think neighborhoods themselves are never they're not stagnant, right? These neighborhoods have changed over the years, from, residential to the early era of mixed use to, a manufacturing center to what it is today. And these are mixed-use neighborhood with lots of jobs, in a variety of sectors. They are also, kind of mixed use within a building, within a block, and across the district. And I think while the neighborhoods have changed over the years, I'll say that, many of you are familiar that the zoning has sort of, is frozen in 1970s. I think on the books, residential is not permitted. This is still a manufacturing district, right? Ground floor should still prioritize manufacturing uses because they're supposed to serve as the manufacturing businesses on the upper floors. Outside of joint living work quarters for artists, there's really no residential use permitted. And also because it's still a manufacturing district and supposed to prioritize manufacturing uses, no community facilities, really a very limited set of community facilities are permitted because the idea is there are no residents to use them. And that includes schools, community centers and other uses. And switching gears to think about the bulk a little bit, this is an area that is covered by a lot of historic districts and with building typologies that is really loft-like. But existing zoning actually doesn't have any height limits, right? And so I think it's not a contextual district, there's no height limits, and I think the bulk regulations really don't align with what we want and the kind of building form that we want to introduce. So the zoning is going to try to change and address some of these mismatches. And another consideration is that the SoHo NoHo's creative landscape has evolved as well since the 1970s. On this chart, you see that the number of certified artists certified by the Department of Cultural Affairs has dwindled over the years. This is not to say that this is no longer relevant. It's only to say that it is a mechanism that was useful and it continues to be useful. But maybe there are opportunities to support our arts and cultural community in a renewed way. And maybe it's time to think about these other strategies. And then zooming out from the SoHo NoHo neighborhood for a second, I want to say that it's important to recognize the economic status of SoHo NoHo as a major job center and second tier.
Slow down by a lot. Okay, slow down.
You guys, I know the acoustics in this room are not ideal, so I would say, please, if there is space to stand on the front over here, if you want to come up, you can take my chair right here. I'll move over onto the stage. There's one chair. If anyone else has an empty chair next to you, raise your hand. I will ask for complete silence. Perhaps we can have sort of a grumbling break every 5 minutes because it's hard to hear and the acoustics are really bad. So if you can't hear well, please come to the front. There's a chair here. Committee members, perhaps we can take our seats on the stage and raise your hand if there's a couple seats in the front row if somebody wants to come up. Thank you.
Okay, do-over. Continue on the economic development. This is, I think as we think about new regulations to put in place, we want to recognize that we should introduce, appropriately flexible zoning so that SoHo can become attuned with the time and continue to be economically resilient, especially coming out of the pandemic. Sorry. So I think this map is switching gears a little bit, talking about housing. I think there are also opportunities where we can leverage the economic success of the neighborhood to think about ways in which we can contribute to a more equitable and inclusive city. So this map shows housing production or gains or losses over the last decade. So the darker the blue is, the more housing in an area has has gained, and then the orange are areas where there is housing loss. As you can see, there are some citywide patterns. Just zooming in to closer to home a little bit, you can see that over the last decade, despite its many amenities, SoHo, NoHo, and transit access, SoHo, NoHo has lost or gained little housing over the years. And this is where, I think with restrictive zoning plays a role, along with other factors. And what it comes down to really, with the little housing that exists in the area, built in the past decades, geared towards most ownership units and units that demand market rents. What we see is really kind of neighborhoods that are a lot less economically and socioeconomically diverse, and generally more affluent than our city. And this is, reflected in the racial makeup, in the high home ownership, as well as household income distribution, as well as housing costs and property values. This is by no means saying that every single person in the neighborhood is affluent or privileged. This is really to put SoHo, NoHo, and the community district too in the context of our city that is a lot more, that is beautifully diverse and has a lot of unmet needs, right? I think while addressing the inequitable housing growth in our city goes well beyond SoHo and NoHo as neighborhoods. I think rezoning SoHo with housing in mind is moving the needle towards the right direction. And so wrap up, it's no secret that SoHo NoHo zoning has been outdated for a long time. We've come to realize that at this moment in time, in particular, maintaining the status quo is no longer acceptable, as we're here to propose a new zoning framework that contribute to a more fair, equitable, and economically resilient SoHo, NoHo, and New York City. And then I'm gonna go through some background in what we've already talked about. This is really grounded in years and months of community engagement, most recently the Envision SoHo NoHo process, co-led by city planning, the borough president, and council member, and a lot of you participated in part of that. There were a lot of meetings, and the culmination of that effort was the Envision SoHo NoHo report. Not saying that there were not unresolved issues or heated debates or difference of opinions. I think there was a common ground that emerged out of the process. And then the foundation of the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan. And just to recap, there were various ideas and principles organized in these three buckets, the quality of life, in terms of residential picture, introducing, really the gist of it is finding a way to recognize the residents' realities on the ground, as well as finding ways to embrace a broader set of residents into the neighborhood. And then in terms of economic vitality, I think there is a general recognition that there should be a wider range of uses permitted in an area to strengthen the mixed-use character, but improving quality of life should be part of the picture. I'll come referring back to all of these throughout the presentation, but I'll say that these are really the foundation of the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan, as well as its four-pronged planning vision, which includes housing, mixed use, the arts, and urban design. We've talked a lot about Envision SoHo NoHo and how that relates to the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan, in a lot of meetings since October last year. And here I just want to take a moment to say that it is so wonderful and such a privilege for me to be here tonight, and I hope you're all coming out of the pandemic stronger, and I thank you for being here, and sorry for all the losses that is out there. And then moving on to the zoning proposal itself, I know that this is what is more central to this presentation, so I'm going to try to do kind of detailed overview of the entire proposal. So the City Planning Commission is proposing 2 land use actions to realize implement the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan and goals. That includes a zoning map amendment and a zoning text amendment. I'm going to go through each of them. So this is a sort of an executive summary. So this is an executive summary with what these actions will do. So the first one would be to map a paired manufacturing residential district. So this is a way to introduce mixed-use regulations that really reflect the neighborhood. And then
Just finish this page. So when they start shouting, just be silent for a second to let them calm down so they can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. And then, as part of this effort, we'll also establish a special SoHo NoHo mixed-use district with, density tiers that reflect different parts of the neighborhood and their different characters. I'll talk about that more shortly. And in terms of, I think density is just numbers without urban design controls and contextual zoning. I think here we're introducing contextual envelopes with, height and setback regulations and maximum building height to make sure that we create regulations and guide new development to fit into the old. And part and parcel is the designation of the mandatory inclusionary housing area over SoHo NoHo to require permanently affordable housing. And lastly, but not least, it's important to it's about establishing new regulations and mechanisms to support SoHo NoHo's arts and cultural legacy into the long term. So now I'm going to go through each 4 of these planning goals. One on housing. So on the housing piece, I'll first clarify the existing residential landscape in SoHo NoHo. I think while the city has many types of housing, including market rate and affordable housing and rent-regulated housing, in SoHo NoHo in general, housing stock mainly consists of market rate housing. While there are some rent-regulated units in the area, and we've asked the community has asked us to take a look and take a stock of the existing rent-regulated units, and I want to say that we've just put out an info brief earlier today summarizing the findings. But I'll note that nothing in the rezoning is weakening the existing tenant controls or tenant protection. I just want to make that clear. And in terms of the types of housing, and in terms of existing.
Everybody, sorry, Sylvia. We need to get to the speakers. All of you have something to say, but every time you disrupt the lecture, we can't get to you. We're also going to have this again tomorrow, I'm told, on the Zoom. So if you can't hear properly, you can hear it tomorrow. But I do think most people here are familiar.
No, sit down. No, you need to. Please finish, and perhaps you can focus on the slides.
This is the process, so just bear with us, everybody. Politely. This is a very, very difficult room to hear in, and it doesn't help. So let's just get through this so we can hear. hear individuals.
No, sit down, please. No, you need to.
No lectures. We're not. 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 No lectures. We're not
Okay, so apologies. I'm gonna try my best. And I hope that without the mask, it's easier to hear for people in the back. And also, I just want to say that this is really an overview of the proposal to facilitate your review of the application. This is not a lecture. I really, I'm nobody to lecture anybody. Just to focus, refocusing back on the housing part of the proposal. This slide refer back to some insight from Envision SoHo NoHo process. I think what we've heard through that process loud and clear is that there is a recognition that zoning should be liberalized so that we can recognize the different realities that people have in the neighborhood. At the same time, live-work traditions should be have a way to continue, and then recognizing there may be underutilized land in the project area, there may be a way to introduce new development in a way that is responsive to and respectful of the neighborhood context. And this chart titled JLDBQA Pathways from the report sort of lays out a potential solution that we took a lot of time to digest and consider. Essentially conceptualizes that this idea that there may be a way to provide different options for residents of existing JLDBQAs, whether it's to continue as JLDBQA or it's transition out of the program to be a regular residential use. So what we've developed is really with all of these different needs in mind. So the proposal would allow a few flavors of housing. Here we try to stay true to the unique history of adaptive reuse and taking into account opportunities. So JLWQA, Joint Living Work Quarters for Artists, existing ones will continue to be a permitted use. There will be a voluntary option to transition to residential use paired with the SoHo NoHo Arts Fund. We'll talk about that whole thing shortly in more detail. I know there are a lot of questions. But focusing back on residential use itself for a moment, it will be allowed as a permitted use as of right with the mandatory inclusionary housing. So this includes new construction as well as commercial to residential conversions. We think that there is a way to embrace change within historic districts as well. We'll talk about bulk later. And then for newly constructed or converted residential units, folks can take advantage of the expanded home occupation provisions. These means they are more flexible live-work provisions to one, reflect the historic tradition of live-work in the neighborhood and continue that in new buildings and converted buildings. And then part and parcel to the use allowance, designation of mandatory inclusionary housing area in SoHo NoHo would also mean that between 25 to 30% of the residential floor area would be dedicated to permanent affordable housing. There are options listed here at which average different income bands, providing a wide variety of affordable rents for family of varied incomes. I'll note that these income bands are generally a lot lower than the median incomes that we see in the surrounding area. And then, looking at SoHo NoHo in the context of the tools the city has in supporting affordable housing affordability. While we don't have a lot of city-owned land to build 100% affordable housing ourselves, we do have a really strong market that we can leverage on private sites to deliver affordable housing. And I think that's why MIH is such an important tool here for us. And we're proposing a number of targeted changes to make sure that MIH work with, not against, the unique context and conditions in SoHo NoHo. So this includes new developments as well as conversions. So in terms of new developments, the way the program typically works is that MIH applies when a development is above the MIH threshold, which is 12,500 square feet. It's actually pretty small. So on sites that are close to this threshold, we think that there may be a stronger incentive to slightly underbuild, say 12,499 square feet, in order to avoid the MIH. So, in order to take away this incentive and fully realize the affordable housing potential, we're proposing to apply MIH when a site is allowed the residential capacity of 12,500 square feet. We hope that this tweak will make sure that there is no affordable housing potential left on the table. Separately, we also want to address the conversions that may be challenging to configure affordable units appropriately on site. So among the different types of buildings, we see in SoHo, NoHo, some, for example, deep interior or narrow lots, maybe more constraints in terms of laying out units. So we're proposing a BSA special permit to allow a payment in lieu option into the Affordable Housing Fund if physical constraints can be really demonstrated. So just to reiterate, these proposed targeted changes will help ensure that MIH work with the context here and make sure that we fully realize the potential for housing. And then second piece that we touched upon, but we're spending a little more time on, I think a lot of people have questions about the arts, is to reimagine policies around the arts and how we support that. And to quote from Envision SoHo NoHo report again, there is shared desire to reinforce SoHo NoHo's unique cultural identity and find ways for people to legalize the existing occupancies and find a way forward. So how does the proposal address these interrelated needs? So as laid out earlier in the presentation, the proposal will provide the much needed optionality. And this is really what we heard from the community, both artists and those who are not living in the neighborhoods today. So existing JLWQAs can remain as they are. This means artists residing in JLWQAs today can continue to do so. And then the unit can be sold and rented to certified artists in the future. People asked whether Department of Cultural Affairs will continue to certify artists. The answer is yes, because if you remain JLWQA, there will be new artist certification. But there is an added option to transition into regular residential use through a contribution towards an arts fund. Our goal here is to accommodate a broader range of people and occupancies, translate a requirement, the artist certification occupancy requirement, into benefits for the arts into the long term. And support publicly oriented programming. In terms of process and administration, there will be a chair certification to facilitate the conversion and arts fund contribution. And the fund will get allocated under DCLA's oversight. And here is just some questions that I've heard and the community board too shared with me before the meeting, so I want to address them. Some of you may be interested. So in terms of why we're introduced this mechanism, who does it benefit? It really reflects the needs and idea coming from Envision SoHo NoHo. The idea is that as we lift the JLWQA occupancy requirement, we link that transitioning out of the program into additional resources for the arts, therefore sustaining the long-term legacy of the arts. Really building upon the 1971 provisions. And in terms of process, people ask, I think some folks are worried that people are going to knock on the doors and kind of check compliance. I think that's not the idea. It's really to forward-looking and creating options for people. And the way that it's applied is that it's applicable when you seek a certificate of occupancy change at DOB from JLWQA to residential use. And then I'll skip some of this and you can ask questions later. Lastly, on the mixed
Sylvia,
use.
let's try to wrap it up. It's can you skip a little bit, because I think it's hard to hear here anyway, and we have a long night ahead. Oh, didn't mean to cut you
Okay.
off.
Yeah, so lastly on uses, I think we touched upon these a lot in the past. Generally, the idea is to introduce residential use, allow a wider range of commercial uses, recognizing existing character, and allow community facility. And then there is a provision to preserve largest of the buildings in SoHo No for job-generating uses. I'll not go into the details. And lastly, there are set of complementary provisions that support active corridors and make sure that the mix of uses and co-locations of uses in the same building would be easy and reflect the existing kind of checkerboard conversion scheme that we see in a neighborhood a lot, and then other type of and gyms and spas would be permitted as of right, consistent with the citywide initiatives that we're working on, and also hotel will be permitted by special permit as we've done as they already are. So lastly, I think this is probably something that people will want to see is bulk regulations in terms of the proposed regulations that shape building forms. So here I'll quickly click through in terms of introducing the right tiers of densities, we're also introducing contextual envelopes with maximum height limits so that new development could fit in with the existing context. And so I'm going to go from the highest, from the lowest to the lowest. So opportunity areas are areas that these are areas.
Wrap it up. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Just a moment. Mike, we're going to finish up the presentation and then we'll go to call testimony. And if you can please be quiet for 1 to 2 more minutes, we will finish. Thank you.
I apologize. I think I was allotted 40 minutes. I don't think I'm over yet, but I'm going to quickly click through it. So here are different, kind of contexts that you see, and this is, in the opportunity areas where you see a maximum building height of 275, and it's loft-like building form. And then this is kind of a street-like view of what the new building will look like in the area.
Please sit down.
Yeah, and then moving on to the historic corridors where along Broadway, for example, see a little bit taller context, and here we're proposing a maximum building envelope, and these are massings so you can see how it relates to surrounding buildings, including cornice lines.
Is this the last slide, Sylvia?
Yeah. And then lastly, in the historic cores, which are a large part of the districts, we're not increasing density at all. So this is existing density. Yeah, and then here are what the illustrative massings look like for new developments in the existing context. And here again, a human eye view of the streetscape to give you a sense of what it looks like. And so this wraps up the zoning proposal, and we've gone through an environmental review and is currently, between draft and final EIS. It's a big document, so I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, we're going, everybody quiet please. Quiet. Could the committee please come up? And we're going to start the public testimony portion of the evening. I believe the mic will be over here. Is that correct? Or is that where we want them? And we're going to call off this is the earlier staff. This is your first. We're going to call off 5 names at a time or more? 5? 5 names. if you could line up somewhere in the neighborhood of the mic, and then we'll call out the next 5. Carter, do you want to call out the names?
So we're going to start with the first 5 speakers are going to be David Thal. And if you guys, if you're going to be speaking, if you can walk down. Okay. All right. So we're going to ask people to come up to your left in the front. Walk down the left side. There's a clear path. You should be able to walk down and line up. I'm going to call 5 names at a time. And if you could just come up, and then after the 4th speaker, I'll reach the next 5. So the first speaker is David Thal, who's already here. Judith Renley, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Austin Celestin. Christopher Marte. And the fifth speaker will be Davidson Morris. So Davidson Morris, if you guys, David Thal, why don't you go ahead and start?
Where are the people? I don't see any of you. Where are the speakers? Come on up. Okay,
Just
one,
let
two.
them go.
Oh, okay. There he is. All right.
David, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, my name is David Thal.
Sorry, you know, the acoustics in here are horrible, so we're just trying to dial this in as we rearrange this. So as I speak loud, we're trying to make sure that there's no feedback. Z, can you make sure that there's no feedback? You got this? Yeah? Okay, great. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noel. David, step right up and speak.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. My name is David Thal. I've lived and been a property owner in SoHo for 31 years and a condo board president of my building for 21 of them. I'm here as the elected representative of my building on Mercer Street. And yes, we are against the plan. I want to quickly go through this. Here's a financial snapshot of my building. We are half owners who live here and half renters, plus 2 street-level commercial units, so we're a good residential commercial cross-section. Our rents are almost half of what they were just 3 years ago. Of our building's 11 units, 4 are currently vacant, including the 2 commercial units. Our real estate taxes have more than quadrupled in the last 10 years. Our insurance has more than doubled in 6 years. But our property values, however, are way down. The point is, SoHo has been in an economic downturn for years with empty storefronts on every block. Everything I just said to you is pre-pandemic information. Now here's how the upzoning plan will personally affect me financially. I'm retired, I live in my condo, I don't rent it, so I get no income from it. In my case, my annual real estate bill is literally the exact same amount I get in my Social Security checks each year. In other words, I now give all my Social Security to the city just to live in the same home I've lived and worked in for 31 years. The upcoming plan creates a new tax for us, unheard of anywhere else in the city. The $100 per square foot tax for SoHo, NoHo residential property owners, which I am, will hit me with an additional $165,000 tax bill, literally 7.5 times more than my current annual real estate taxes in one bite. Let that sink in. I live off my life savings. I'm retired. The new SoHo, NoHo tax will effectively bankrupt some middle-class owners, no doubt. The bottom line, this upzoning plan doesn't help individual owners or small businesses, it clobbers them. Now, in conclusion, I have one question for the planning committee, and then I'll be done. So please just give me 10 seconds. Here's my question. Let me ask the question. Have you taken a survey of the financial conditions of SoHo, NoHo residents, or made an analysis of the economic impact the upzoning plan will have on them? That's the question.
All right,
Not
thank
from
you, David.
outside real
David,
estate
we're gonna have
groups,
to cut you off.
but from individual property owners living here. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Judith. I'm going to ask everybody to hold your applause. I know a lot of people want to speak. I've got in excess of 80 speakers. We can't
Over
applaud after
103.
everybody, or excuse me, 103. We can't applaud after everybody if we're going to get through. Judith.
Hi, my name is Judith Renlay, and I am a largely homebound, disabled senior, aging in place, who's lived here for 47 years in rent stabilization. It is maddening to consider how to stop the developers and politicians from destroying a neighborhood in some misguided concept of city planning. This Envision project has no vision. Only a drive to repeat past mistakes. We need reform, not a knee-jerk resorting to old ways, long proven inadequate. There's much luxury housing already vacant. We don't need more. I see the plan as misguided in its assumption that imposing an entirely new structural reality on a neighborhood is preferable to working with a creative recycling adaptation of existing structures to increase affordable housing. I see the plan as a money-making operation for the developers who fail to see the potential of changing existing structures rather than build new ones. It's all about money, not about housing. I can only see the already existing, truly affordable housing units are being threatened by this plan. I find the statement, "We cannot stop the machine," chilling.
Thank you, Judith, for coming out tonight. Austin Celestin.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Austin Celestin, and I am a NYU student studying urban design. I hear a lot of talk about displacement. And when I hear about displacement and gentrification, I often go to my neighbors and my friends up in the Bronx. I see how wealthier areas like this neighborhood right here, in my home neighborhood of the Upper West Side, has seen virtually no housing built, even a net loss of housing, which has caused developers to push their way into areas like the South Bronx, Crown Heights, Fordham, and prices them out because of the lack of housing and the lack of opportunity to build new housing in high market, high value areas. I also think about the potential of being able to build truly affordable housing in a neighborhood with such great opportunities. 10 subway lines run through this neighborhood, and having up to 900 affordable homes for new working class families to be able to benefit from not just the transit access, but the jobs, the housing, and the arts, the culture, being able to access all of that. We all here claim to say that the neighborhood is about character and everyone wants to enjoy this character. What good is preserving character if not everyone can enjoy said character? I would like to make an appeal from someone who grew up next to 2 historic districts. I understand the beauty that comes from it, but I also understand that it does a good job at blocking opportunities for working class people to enjoy those same opportunities. I would like to point out that this is a great opportunity to expand the available, to enjoy the character that you all love to everyone else in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. The next speaker. The next speaker is Christopher Marte. And Christopher, I just want to congratulate you on last night. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher Marte, State Committee Person of the 65th Assembly District and candidate for City Council. For the past 2 years, this community has stood up and asked the city to answer some questions. What's going to happen with displacement? The person before me talked about displacement, but where you look at the developments at this site, they're bordering Chinatown. This is an upzone of Chinatown, SoHo, and NoHo. And when we look across this room, it seems like residents in Chinatown were not even invited. They're trying to create this deal to backstab one of the working communities of colors in our neighborhood, and that's a disgrace. If we really want to talk about affordable housing, we should not let developers get away with development without actually committing to develop it. And that's what this plan does. Yesterday, this community, Chinatown and the Lower East Side, gave us a mandate. They voted that this rezoning should not happen this year. We should wait until next administration. They voted to take a stand on backdoor dealings where developers pay our mayor to control city planning. And they voted to say that we should have a say in our communities. Thank you so much, and we should scrap this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and I hope this is the first of many meetings that we're going to see you attending. I'm going to call out the next 5 speakers, and then we're going to go to Davison Morris. The next 5 speakers are William Cowlon or Cowlo, Steve Wanta, Whitney Dow, Trevor Levin, and Chris Good. Davidson? All right, Davidson, you're gonna pass? Great, thank you. All right, so the next speaker is William Cowlo. Okay, then we're going to go to Steve Wanta.
Is this okay? Oh, all right. I've lived here since 1984. On Crosby Street, I raised both my daughters, and our place was affordable when we bought it, and it's still affordable for us, as well as many people who've stayed in our building. From what I understand from the myriad papers that aren't PowerPoint presentations, that it's very unlikely that little or any of the 900 affordable units would actually get built because there's so many loopholes. And NYU, who is a more recent player in this whole thing, actually has no responsibility in any of their development to build affordable units. So I think that the politicians and the planners, it's shameful that they're trying to push this through. And the people who are supporters of this are naive or ignorant or shills for developers.
Thank you, Steve. Also just want to mention that we have Borough President Gail Brewer, who's here with us also tonight. And Gail, I'm not sure where you are, but congratulations also on last night. Our next speaker is Whitney Dow.
Carter, you need to speak louder.
Next speaker is Whitney Dow. The feedback.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. My name is Whitney Dow. I came in here under I'm an ARR working artist living in SoHo since 1996. And I've raised my 3 daughters here with my wife, Thomasine. We've watched as developers and and stores have come in and turned what used to be a working artist neighborhood into an amusement park for rich shoppers, tourists, and developers. And I'm going to, speaking personally for a second, now when we get pushed out, because as this man over here spoke about, the insane real estate taxes we pay for zero services, when you now want, when we get forced out and bring in some hedge funder or whoever it is to buy my apartment, you're going to tax me for the right to get kicked out of my own apartment. Speaking globally, as a community, there are lots of things that we need in SoHo. There are so many things we need in SoHo. We need traffic. We need traffic direction on Broome Street during this. We need people to pick up the garbage. We need people dealing with this expansion of restaurants and the invasion of tourists and restaurants. There's so many things that we need here, and we also need affordable housing. And there's not anybody in this room that doesn't believe we need affordable housing. Everybody wants affordable housing here. And you could start with that lot at Lafayette and Grand Street that's sitting empty and take that money and build a high rise of affordable housing, and everybody in this room would support it. What this neighborhood does not need, it does not need additional luxury housing to put pressures on our schools, on our sanitation, and on our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Whitney. Trevor Levin.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Trevor Levin. I work for a nonprofit provider of affordable and supportive housing, but I'm here today not in that capacity, just as a concerned citizen of New York City. Because how we use space in the middle of Manhattan affects everyone in the region, everyone in Manhattan, and everyone in the city. Despite the blip of relatively high vacancies due to COVID, which caused a temporary drop in rents, we are still in a housing emergency with just 2.2% vacancies of affordable housing. That is true. You can look it up yourself. To the Manhattan director, to the representatives of elected officials, I want to say your constituents, many of whom are not here today, are hurting. The city's Where We Live report, which was published last year, I highly recommend it to everybody. The Where We Live report found that almost half of New Yorkers, 44%, spend over 30% of their income on housing. Over 25% are severely rent burdened, spending over 50% of their income on housing. And the number of homeless New Yorkers reached the highest point since the Great Depression, a majority being families with children. The report says, and I 100% agree, that the primary cause of homelessness is a lack of affordable housing. This proposal would allow for more affordable housing, and importantly, the market rate housing would absorb demand from higher income people who would otherwise look to older units in other neighborhoods, bidding up prices and spreading gentrification. While I'm disappointed that the proposal would not allow for even more housing in this ideally situated neighborhood, and I'm also disappointed at the office density, which I think is too high. I believe it is a model for preserving neighborhood character while creating more homes. The city begins asking, how can we add more housing, rather than what neighborhood could we possibly fit in? And I'd appreciate.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to call the next 5 speakers, and then we're going to have Chris Good speak, Roger Newton, Alexander Naratoff, Brendan Fitzgerald, Jake Schmidt. All right. So the next 5 speakers after Chris Good will be Roger Newton, Alexander Naratoff, Brendan Fitzgerald, Jake Schmidt, and Ankur Dalal. Chris?
Hello?
Remind everybody, we really need to stick to the 2 minutes if we want to get through everybody. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, I moved to Wooster Street in 1977, and I've lived on Grand near Baxter for the last 20 years. It's a great place to live. I enjoy checking in with the crew at Landmark Diner. I like the crossing guard. I chat with the crossing guard who lives on Spring Street. For me, it's these kinds of many small relationships, obviously there's many more, that make a neighborhood. SoHo Alliance and Village Preservation have been very effective at keeping my loft values going through the roof, year after year. Fighting new housing is great for property values, but it also has meant no new neighbors except for the rich. We are now predominantly an enclave of the super rich, or boomers like me. This is pretty boring, definitely not a recipe for a healthy neighborhood. It would be great to have more markets and other service stores that just don't cater to office workers and tourists. But for this, we need enough actual residents to keep them in business. Our refusal to allow change has not only damaged our community, but is a burden on other neighborhoods as well. We export our housing construction to East New York, and our children, such as my own grown sons, end up taking housing in Bed-Stuy or Sunset Park. I would welcome new economically diverse neighbors, but the status quo has not accomplished this. We need to encourage the building of housing. I support the rezoning because it is good for our neighborhood as well as the city at large. I appreciate all the planners who worked on the Envision SoHo process, and I feel the housing update on Zoom was incredibly well done. I do have two concerns with the current plan. The first is that there is not enough of an incentive to build housing rather than offices. The second is that the lottery for BMR units should be equally available to everyone. Prioritizing residents of CB2 would be counterproductive to improving our neighborhood. Thank you.
Next speaker is Roger.
Hello. Hi, my name is Roger Newton. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. I own my own home in an artist in residence building. It is both where I live and where I work. If these zoning changes go through, I will have to pay $120,000 to change the loft that I already own to residential. The reason I am here at all is for the joint work living quarters for artist zoning. The proposed zoning changes do not represent what the residents of the affected neighborhoods want or need. They are being imposed from outside by deep-pocketed real estate interests that are drooling over the prospect of exploiting our neighborhoods so they can get even richer. The proposed zoning changes do not make sense for the economic recovery of our neighborhood or represent a good long-range plan within the recovery needs of the city as a whole. Despite the media portrayal of SoHo as former artists' lofts now owned by the wealthy, the reality of the neighborhood is still mostly workers, artists, small business owners, many of whom have their businesses right here in the community. Even with the current temporary storefront vacancies, the extraordinary concentration of independent artisan shops, renegade galleries, exhibition spaces, restaurants, cafes, bars, and hole-in-the-wall surprises are not only the drivers of the neighborhood's economy, but are the very things that continue to make SoHo the tourist destination known around the world that it is, which contributes so much to the appeal of New York City's tourism market as well. The proposed rezoning will kill everything about this neighborhood that makes it special. Our artisan shops will be replaced by big chain stores that will squeeze us out of space and dollars. If big real estate gets its big stores, all the money spent in the neighborhood will immediately leave the neighborhood, never having stopped in the pockets of the people who actually live, work, and site their businesses here. It is not good for the local economy. It is not a part of a good recovery plan for the city as a whole. I urge the planning department to reevaluate and abandon this ill-advised zoning change. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I just want to let everybody know that we've got 6 empty seats up in the front, so if you're having trouble hearing, please come up and sit. You can sit in any of these seats. Next speaker is Alexander Naratov. Alexander, the Lower Manhattan loft tenants in the Envision SoHo NoHo advisory group that was convened by the borough president, council member Chin, and city planning.
I've lived in SoHo and worked in SoHo for the past So, Alexander Naratov, I've lived and worked in SoHo for 41 years. What is unique about SoHo and NoHo is that mixed-use nature of the neighborhood, from the macro, building by building, down to the micro level, where each space could be used simultaneously for living and working without separation. This concept, first developed in SoHo, became part of the zoning resolution, counteracting 20th century planning theory that sought to separate functions, living, working, commerce, into exclusive zones. The SoHo concept became particularly appropriate as the pandemic accelerated the trend to mix living and working functions. The advisory board discussed SoHo NoHo for months, trying to preserve its specialness while fixing its 50-year-old anachronistic features, expanding the artist's exclusivity to makers of all types, and finding ways to introduce affordable housing into an area with few underdeveloped sites. The resultant proposal is surprisingly disappointing, aggressively returning this neighborhood to conventionality. Few affordable housing units will result from this. Large sites will go commercial. Developers' choices will be made easier by the new MIH penalty and the $100 a square foot conversion fee. Sites in SoHo and NoHo are small. Most will yield fewer than 15 units, thus be under the MIH threshold. It is truly a joke that a penalty would be imposed on existing legal joint living work quarters for artists. Why not impose the same fee on commercial development over FAR 5? Why not impose it on retail development over 10,000 square feet? We have to make sure also that no IMD or rent-stabilized JLWQA space is converted to use group 2 residential without the protected tenant's authorization to prevent personal use eviction of certified artists or their families being replaced by now legal use group 2 residents. This would require that JLWQAs and residential uses could coexist in a building. Why not make that a general rule? The mixed-use characteristic.
I'm going to have to cut you off, but I do have a question for you. As a representative of the Lower Manhattan Loft Tenants Association, do you guys have a position on the proposed rezoning? We do not support this. Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Brendan Fitzgerald. Brendan? All right, it looks like Brendan is not here. Jake Schmidt?
Hey everyone, who's got one of these cool signs like I do? Hold them up, wave them around, let them know we're here. Awesome. Now, some of the versions of this sign make a really good point. They say the rezoning would make SoHo less diverse. And that would be bad, right? Because SoHo is so diverse already. So let's do the same thing. Let's hold up the signs, but all the white people keep them down. Yeah, that's about what I thought. Anyway, I'm just...
Continue.
Go ahead.
Wrap it
Anyway,
up.
I'm just here to remind Community Board 2, we caught the chair of your land use committee on a hot mic when she didn't know she was being recorded saying she didn't think SoHo have as much affordable housing as other neighborhoods. So if you vote against this rezoning, we know why. You're not going to be able to pretend that you're doing it to more affordable. That's all I'm here to say. I yield my time.
Thanks. The next speaker is Ankur Dalal. Or just come up and speak. Don't stop.
Quiet, please. Quiet.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Ankur Dalal, and I'm a strong supporter of the proposed rezoning. I support the rezoning because it can help create over 3,000 new homes, including 900 new affordable homes, into incredibly wealthy, high opportunity.
and
I'm
let
sorry, can you
her
call-
speak?
I can jump in if you want to.
Guys, if you could please keep it down and let him speak.
I'm sorry, could I please speak?
You have to have the courtesy to listen to other people's point of view. You'll get your chance, but please, let's continue, and the next speaker, the same thing.
SoHo and NoHo are currently wealthy, segregated neighborhoods. DCP has determined that over 40% of the SoHo NoHo study area earns over $200,000 a year. That is 4 times the city average. And they have concluded that the neighborhoods are significantly more affluent than the borough or city as a whole. This economic disparity largely arises because of the cost of housing in this neighborhood. DCP has determined that the market rate of 2-bedroom apartments in SoHo and NoHo is $8,067 a month. A 3-bedroom is $12,758. So unless you lucked into a below-market rent, stabilized lease, or had the good fortune to buy your home years ago, you really have to be rich to live here. And I mean that because DCP found that there are no income-restricted affordable housing units in the SoHo NoHo study area. Really, none at all. And CB2 only has 3% of its housing stock consist of government-assisted affordable housing. These neighborhoods have not pulled their weight in terms of affordable housing, and this is an opportunity to fix that. Please develop the new housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Dalal. All right, I'm going to call out the next 5 speakers. Deborah Clearman, Michelle Choi, Richard Blodgett, Susan Stoltz, and Bob Melendi. Deborah Clearman, he's here. Michelle Choi, I thought I saw you. Oh, go ahead, Michelle. Why don't you come up and speak?
Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Michelle Choi. I live on Lower Crosby Street. I've been a resident of SoHo for 17 years. I think this proposal is ridiculous, and I mean that in the worst way. I feel like this proposal was written by a supervillain because it has the corrupt politicians, it has greedy developers, absurd taxes, eviction. You call it displacement, but I call it eviction of lower income people, people of color, pioneering artists who started SoHo on their own. I have a young child, and I do not know, and also unbridled expansion of retail space, restaurants, nightlife. I have a young child, and I do not know how people can raise a family in this environment. I'm worried that SoHo will look like Union Square in 15 years, Times Square in 25 years, and maybe in 50 years it'll look like Las Vegas. I think this is all about special interests, and it has nothing to do with public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. The next speaker is Dick Blodgett, and he'll be followed by Susan Stoltz, Bob Melendi, and Mary Ann Arisman. Dick? Susan Stoltz, Bob Melendi, and Mary Ann Arisman, and Dick Blodgett is speaking now.
Good evening. My name is Dick Blodgett. I'm a board member of Village Preservation, and I'm speaking on his behalf. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm a board member of Village Preservation, and I'm speaking on his behalf. One of the many lies of the de Blasio zoning plan is that only rich people live in SoHo and NoHo. In many rich people do live in the neighborhood, but as shown very clearly by census figures and documented in our Village Preservation Report, that is only part of the story. Many residents with lower or moderate incomes also live here, mostly in rent-regulated units, and they are disproportionately Asian American because the rezoning actually includes parts of Chinatown. In fact, even in this relatively wealthy area, about 20% of households have annual incomes below $35,000. Ironically, They are too poor to qualify for the affordable housing that the rezoning plan is supposed to create. As our study shows, even if this so-called affordable housing is built, and that's a very big if, the new units will be inhabited by people who are richer and less racially diverse than the people who live in stabilized housing in the neighborhood right now. In other words, if the rezoning results in the types of developments the mayor claims it will, the neighborhood will become richer, less diverse, and more expensive. This is hardly the outcome the mayor has been touting to the public. When I consider the plan, I think, what a crock of baloney. For these reasons and many more, we urge the community board, the borough president, and all of our city council members to vote no. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. It's nice to see you. Susan Stoltz.
Oh, hi. I've been on, can you hear me in this? Okay. I followed this process from the very beginning, and the very first question I asked the very first night was, what do we have, what is prepared for a zoning, if the zoning law changes, what will happen to all the loft tenants, the rent stabilized tenants, and that are governed by a law that's New York State law, and this would be a zoning law. And this has not been figured out to this day. It's just left up in the air. The problem being that when I moved in here 42 years ago, 2 years later, there was a whole fight to get rid of all the roommates in the whole city in '82, and that was solved by the governor. That was one of these ridiculous things. But this one would start in SoHo, and it's a way to just eliminate people, and they are senior citizens, most of them. I moved in '79, and I was on the young end of the original tenants. And I want people to know that this has not been, people across the city do not know this, that it's a way to eliminate senior citizens, loft tenants who built the place. We built the place. We built it. We did not, this was, you know, we learned how to do sheetrock and pipes and the whole damn thing. Everybody that moved in and before us, and I'm speaking for, I'm a 40-year, we call it 40, there's 50-year, 60-year. And these people do not need to have this come down on their head, some stupid legal argument that it should be the responsibility to figure this out before there's a zoning change. I have fought before with these, and I am not going to be able to do this again. I have the responsibility, as many artists do, of all the art. I have my partner's art, and I have several organizations, all these archives, and they cannot be placed, and they are all diverse artists, different, anyways.
I think we get the point. Thank you very much for coming down tonight. The next speaker is Bob Melendi. Bob's going to be followed by Marianne Arisman, Andrew Berman, Paul Vittich, Susan Shoemaker, Laura Tenenbaum, and Trevor Stewart. Bob?
Hi. I've been asked by my building to convey our reaction to this plan. Thank you. Everyone in the building is opposed vehemently to this plan. Thank you.
Next speaker is Marianne Arisman.
Wow. I hope I can, there you go. Okay. I'm Marianne Arisman, and I'm a proud board member of Village Preservation, and I am speaking on behalf of the organization. Mayor de Blasio likes to wrap this plan in a veneer of housing justice and equity, claiming that virtually every new development in the rezoning area will include 25 to 30% of affordable housing. What he doesn't tell you is that's a lie, and that and that the incredibly generous loopholes in the plan make it not only easy, but financially, make it not only easy, but financially more profitable to build with little or no affordable housing, which is exactly what's going to happen. Here are the types of development that are exempted from the affordable housing requirements of the plan. All ground floor retail, which is required in any new development, any kind of commercial office space, any kind of hotel, which is allowable by special permit, and any kind of community facility, which sounds nice, but we all know most likely will be NYU dorms or other university facilities. Even luxury condos or market rate residential, as long as it doesn't exceed 25,000 square feet per zoning lot. Our study found that on every site the city claimed affordable housing would be built, it would be more profitable to build with these exempted uses rather than with those that triggered the affordable housing requirements. Don't buy the mayor's bogus plan. We urge the community board, the borough president, and all of our city council members to vote no on de Blasio's big lie.
Thank you, Mary. Our next speaker is Andrew Berman.
I'm Andrew Berman, also from Village Preservation. I have to say, watching the city planning presentation, we've all gotten used to the concept of the big lie in politics, but I think the de Blasio administration has really brought it to new heights. Listening to this presentation, you would think we had a process where they listened to us. They ignored everything that we said. You would think that this was a plan that presented no danger of destroying affordable housing. It will destroy affordable housing. There are hundreds of units of rent-regulated and loft law housing in this neighborhood which the new rezoning will incentivize the destruction of. You would think that under this plan, every new development would include affordable housing in it. It won't. There are so many loopholes in the plan which they don't talk about, by which developers can build without a single unit of affordable housing. You would think, listening to them, that this was about creating a healthy retail environment. It's not. It's about allowing huge big box chain stores into the neighborhood, which is what this will do, along with enormous eating and drinking establishments, which will push out any of the remaining small businesses in the neighborhood, any of the remaining arts-related groups or galleries. It will turn SoHo and NoHo into a giant mall. And that's what the developers who've been giving generously to Mayor de Blasio over the last 8 years want. That is the entire reason for this plan, to get rid of restrictions, not because of equity or justice. And by the way, all of the community groups involved in this have said we would welcome an opportunity to look at changing the zoning in good ways, in ways that would help the public, in ways that would help small businesses, in ways that would reinforce the artistic character in the neighborhood, in ways that would allow new, real, deep, affordable housing to go in on places like parking lots and parking garage sites where it's fine to develop at the right scale. That is not what this plan is. This plan is Mayor de Blasio's big lie. It's his final gift to his developer patrons, and we call upon our city council members and the city planning commission to vote no.
Thank you, Andrew. The next speaker is Paul Vittich. Hey, Paul Vittich, are you here? Paul Vittich? No Paul. All right, Susan Shoemaker.
Susan Shoemaker. I am a 17-year homeowner in SoHo. My name is Susan Shoemaker. I live at 38 Crosby Street in SoHo. I've been a homeowner in SoHo for 17 years and served on my condominium board for 17 years. I'm also an architect and an urban planner. And I've had an opportunity to look at parts of the draft environmental statement and the plans that have only been available to us for a short time now, and I've been able to confirm some of the things that have been pointed out to us by Municipal Art Society and Village Preservation. And I want to talk about 5 specific issues. One of them is density. The floor area ratios that are being increased in the proposed plan are very aggressive, and they allow very large buildings to be built. And I think that city planning is glossing over that in terms of the way that they're presenting it. Second, the building heights. I live in one of the tallest buildings in SoHo along Broadway. It's about 150 feet to the cornice, but the new proposed zoning would allow buildings up to 205 feet in the Broadway corridor. That's a very substantial increase in height. Third, there are the provisions for affordable housing include, as people have noted, a loophole. A 25,000 square foot building can be built without any affordable housing. That's a very substantial building. That could be up to 14 stories on a typical New York City lot. So this is not a negligible element. And then fourth, the provision for very large retail spaces. The community has told city planning and our representatives over and over again, we do not want large retail spaces in SoHo. We already have congestion problems on Broadway and other streets. And yet this does not seem to be listened to because it's not reflected at all in the proposed zoning. And then I want to mention something that doesn't seem to be an element in city planning's thinking at all, and that's climate change. The plan actually would encourage buildings in SoHo to be replaced with new construction. That doesn't make sense at a time when we all realize.
Our next 2 speakers are Laura Tenenbaum and Trevor Stewart, and they'll be followed by Maria Feliciano, Lynn Ellsworth, Lawrence Beebe, Bruce Williams, and Stephen Gossenberg.
My name is Trevor Stewart. I'm very proud to be a trustee of Village Preservation, and I'm speaking on their behalf. One of the many outrageous things about this proposal is that at the last minute, an allowance was inserted to enable NYU more or less unlimited ability to expand into these areas, where the zoning currently prohibits it. This is no coincidence. The university's been seeking to expand into NoHo and SoHo for years, but I would remind everyone that when the NYU 2031 expansion plan was approved in 2012, which, by the way, both Margaret Chin and Gail Brewer voted for, we were told that this would limit the university's expansion to those sites and they would grow no further. This throws those promises out of the window. And everyone should be clear that any space developed for NYU or any similar university or institution under this rezoning plan is exempted from any affordable housing requirements. During the public engagement process for this plan, the vast majority of participants made clear that there were 3 things they absolutely did not want to see: an upzoning, oversized chain retail, and allowances for NYU expansion. And guess what? Those are now the cornerstones of this plan. For these reasons and many more, we urge the community board, the borough president, and all of our city council members to vote no on this mayor's sham plan.
Here's Laura Tenenbaum. Laura? It's nice.
Good seeing you too, in person. My name is Laura Tenenbaum. I have lived in SoHo since 1973. I reside in an all-artist co-op that has been so stable we have not had a sale in the building since 2001. This is not just poor planning, it is bad planning. It is greedy planning that will not result in a better, more equitable community, but rather in a high-end commercial district filled with big box stores, clubs, large experiential retail, NYU, pied-à-terres, and money-laundering condos for ultra-wealthy foreigners. The plan does not allow for open space, parks, green spaces, schools. Pioneering artists, Asian American residents, and others will be displaced. This will be the new Midtown. I have some questions for city planning. One, if this is for affordable housing, why are there so many carve-outs for developers to avoid MIH? If this is for affordable housing, why does the zoning encourage commercial development over residential? Why is the DEIS so filled with assumptions and so thin in actual data? Why was so much of the data in the DEIS gathered during the pandemic and then treated as if the findings were reflective of non-pandemic reality? Why did you scrap the results of a year of community participation through Envision SoHo NoHo and come up with this travesty and pretend that it's still being listened to? 6, why isn't your worst case scenario really the worst case scenario? Why does it undercount the potential sites for commercial development, not discuss transfer of air rights, ignore the likelihood that almost every building will be able to sprout penthouses on every roof? I have more questions, but I'm going to stop now. It's clear that there is no real planning in city planning any longer. One more sentence. City planning belongs not to the people, but to big real estate.
Thanks, Laura. Maria? Maria, come on up.
I'm Lynn Ellsworth with Human Scale NYC. We're a network of community groups across the city, and I'll be reading our statement from our board. In a rational world, we'd be talking about how to densify the enormous parts of New York City that are zoned for 1- and 2-family homes. Places like Richmond Hill, where everyone has a car, a yard, and a garage, instead of trying to over-densify and destroy several historic districts in Manhattan. 15% of the city's landmass is zoned for single-family homes. Nearly 3/4 of our city is zoned very low density, covering about 100 miles, or about 3 billion square feet. Those low-density areas exist in the outer parts of the boroughs, where lots of low-income people already live, many of them people of color, and many of those low-density areas are transit deserts. So in a rational world, would you be talking about extending public transit to those areas, using the staring-in-our-face solution of through-running trains at Penn Station? That would allow for a unified regional rail system, which is the only smart way to equitably spread the opportunities for economic development to low-income communities in this region, instead of concentrating those opportunities in Manhattan to benefit big real estate, in this case, Edison. But Vicki Bean has long had it in for historic districts, publishing her historic district bashing views with Ed Glazer, the ideologue of towerization of Manhattan. This rezoning and the Seaport Hughes Tower is her ideology at work. The problem is, this administration has constructed an entirely false narrative of affordable housing to justify what it's doing. It is anchored in right-wing, trickle-down housing supply fundamentalism. And we know that trickle-down doesn't work in theory or in practice. Worse, Bean, Glenn, and de Blasio, almost done here, disingenuously claim that this upzoning will create a racially diverse neighborhood, when all it will do is exacerbate economic inequality by flooding the area with more luxury housing that will be sold to rich people, most likely foreign investors. The real racism here...
Thanks, Lynn. We've got to move on. I just want to take this moment to say that people can submit written correspondence to the community board. The email address is
SoHoNoHo@cb2.org.
so
cb2manhattan.org.
is SoHoNoHo@cb2manhattan.org. So if you want to submit written testimony, please feel free. The person I called before, I just want to make sure she's not here. Maria Feliciano. Oh, yeah, come on up. You're next. Sorry. And then it's followed by Lawrence Beebe, Bruce Williams, and Stephen Gosenberg.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I am a resident. Can you hear me? Yeah? I am a resident of SoHo. I also work in SoHo. I am raising a family here. And I stand before you in complete opposition to this awful plan. I cannot be any more eloquent than my fellow neighbors have been. I would like, however, to really insist on the illegality of the process right now. The city has stolen our time. The city continues to steal our time, as you just witnessed, 30, 40 minutes of the same crap that we have been feeded. I also would like to tell the city that this is what it feels like to not hide behind a Zoom screen, that these are people right here. So I urge you, of course, to consider the neighborhood. Nobody actually had to call me to tell me to travel here, like some others back here. I walked here with my neighbors, and we did it willingly, and we did it with conviction. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I just want to clarify that Community Board 2 had asked for a presentation, and we had said that, keep it to 40 minutes. And so we had asked for focusing primarily on what the zoning would change. And so we did ask for that. So I just want to say thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now we're going to go.
Sorry, it's also part of the public process.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that you guys saw what city planning was presenting. That's a part of the process. You may not like it, but it is a part of the process, and it's important that they're able to share with you what they're looking to do. Next speakers, Lawrence Beebe, followed by Bruce Williams, Stephen Gossenberg, Todd Fine, and Susan Gorin.
My name is Lawrence Beebe. My recently departed wife is Carol Conway, a renowned modern dancer. She established our home over 50 years ago in an artist cooperative on Bond Street, where she both conducted her Carol Conway Dance Company and raised her children. I remain here in our home on Bond Street as her widower, and I continue creating my visual art and writing to this day. NoHo did not become as internationally renowned as it is by way of real estate developers. It is the community that so many want to visit, take selfies in, and live in by way of our artists, their work, and their stories. As always happens, that cachet also attracts predators. Our city has well-established ways to protect our communities from predators. However, now our own city government is running roughshod over the due process and rule of law that most of us rely upon our city to protect and safeguard. I'm here to cry outrage. I hear my wife Carol's shouts from her ashes, and I am here to echo them. Carol and many others like her worked valiantly and tirelessly for many decades, essentially her entire adult life, to create NoHo from what was essentially an abandoned shit heap. They had precious little for resources than their imaginations and fortitude. Our NoHo became what it is by way of the equity of a great deal of blood, sweat, and tears, not of real estate developers, but countless artists, many gone now, but many of those still with us are crowded here tonight. And don't forget the small business people dedicated to providing for us while fostering a true community. It is a travesty for NoHo to be now capitalized upon while being simultaneously destroyed by what are essentially predators. These wolves with their selfish agendas ironically prefer instead being called developers. Shame, particularly on the very government charged with protecting us.
Thank you, Lawrence. And I'm very, very, very sorry to hear about your wife, Carol. I was just looking at her name yesterday when I was sending out emails, so I'm really, really sorry to hear about that. Next speaker is Bruce Williams, also on Bond Street.
Hi, my name is Bruce Williams. I've been a certified artist for the past 27 years now. And when I look at this plan, I like to think that I'm an optimist. And I think, well, this is great. They're guaranteeing us this affordable housing. But frankly, 30%, 25% affordable housing to 80% is nothing but servants' quarters. It enforces the monoculture of rich people without any diversity. And not only that, if we look at the history of SoHo and NoHo, where is the enforcement? Everyone here knows that the enforcement of regulation in SoHo and NoHo has been very lax. That's why we have big box stores there now. There's no guarantee that there's any kind of enforcement that's going to be done going forward with these big buildings to even maintain what optimistically would be the 20 to 30% affordable housing. It's just not believable. This is just another way of putting in more rich places for people to live or to store their money. Like the buildings that are empty with the housing, why don't we take those places where people own but don't live? Let's put in people there instead of building more empty spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I also want to point out, for anybody who's been to Bond Street, Bruce is the one who created all the golden nymphs that rise up above 24 Bond Street. So Bruce is a big reason that people come to the neighborhood and take pictures, particularly tourists and other visitors. Stephen Gossenberg is the next speaker. Stephen Gossenberg, not here. All right. Todd Fine.
Yes. So the city said they don't have many public sites to build affordable housing. There's a site that's changing the general project plan of the World Trade Center, World Trade Center 5. LMDC had $40 billion to potentially build affordable housing. 0 affordable complexes built by any of these administrations. What are they doing? On 5 World Trade Center, Silverstein is getting to build an 80-story luxury tower with a deal between the city and the state. De Blasio could call the bluff tomorrow and build more units on one site at the World Trade Center than the entire rezoning. But what is he doing? He has said nothing. He's going along with Cuomo. It's going to be an embarrassment across the entire world with the 20th anniversary that the World Trade Center, with $40 billion, with all those listening sessions demanding affordable housing, nothing was built. They don't care about affordable housing. They're going to destroy one of the great architectural jewels of the world in SoHo to give leveraged developers a bailout. It's disgusting, and we should stop it. And these shills actually work for the real estate industry. Open New York is funded by a real estate investor. It's all lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Todd. Next speaker is going to be Susan Gorin, followed by Jean Cryer, Anita Isola, Margaret Baisley, Suzanne Sheen, Kathleen Wakeham, and Pete Davies.
My name is Susan Gorin. I've lived on Washington Place, Broadway and 10th, 18th and Broadway. I currently live at 505 LaGuardia Place, where I grew up. And I am here tonight to tell you that I'm also a former employee of NYU and the daughter of a member of this board for more than 30 years and a former vice chancellor at NYU. I could have made talking points. I could have written signs. I could have done a lot of things on this card. Instead, I scribbled some notes for things that will not be talked about here. I haven't attended a community board meeting in years because when Scott Stringer took over, this became a thing that rubber-stamped a lot of zoning changes. The idea that I am at the same meeting I stopped attending 20 years ago, 30 years ago, listening to the same arguments from a planning commission or a city government organization that would change a neighborhood without the input and the correct attitude towards the situation is appalling. Paris doesn't gut its historic buildings, it maintains them. They do not come into neighborhoods and let NYUs approve a building with the help of the city and have that building turn out to be nothing like the one they said they would build. Look at Mercer Street and know what NYU will give us when this is over. This is a lie of the greatest kind. And I have staked myself as a disabled New Yorker who stopped working at 49. I can't regroup either. I grew up here. I watched the developers. This is too much Real Estate Board of New York. This is too much New York University. This is no hospitals, no supermarkets, no transportation, no schools. And my final comment is,
all right, thanks, Susan.
That's 3
Jean
schools
Cryer?
and
Susan, thank you.
built none.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Jean Creer. I'm a 25-year resident of this area. I live near Astor Place, and I proudly serve on the board of Village Preservation. One of the many pernicious lies in the city's rezoning plan is that it categorically rules out the possibility that buildings containing affordable rent-regulated housing, which are mostly occupied by long-time lower-income neighborhood residents, won't be demolished, but they will be. As the Village Preservation Study has clearly shown, there are hundreds of such units in the rezoning area and thousands on the periphery in the secondary displacement zone. Right now, those units, indeed those buildings, survive because current zoning doesn't allow buildings larger than they are. Almost all new development has been parking lots and garages, gas stations, and small commercial buildings with no residents. As soon as you upzone to allow these very lucrative types of development as of right, up to 2.5 times the size that is currently allowed, those existing buildings with affordable housing will come down. Those residents will be displaced and their rent-regulated affordable housing will be destroyed. And for what? Most likely big box retail, high-end office buildings or hotels, NYU dorms or other facilities, and luxury condos, which, if they're under 25,000 square feet, are not required to include any affordable housing. 6 words: rezoning plan destroys existing affordable housing.
The next speaker is Anita Isola.
This plan is such an obvious scam. It is his final scam before he leaves and his last opportunity to pay back all his developer friends. What do we have here? We have possibly a doubling of the current allowable size, which means more shadows and less light. Now, the selling point they're using for this is affordable housing. Yet, obviously, he's displacing hundreds of families to create this affordable housing, but who knows how much there'll be because of all the exceptions that they have. Not the least of which, of course, is NYU, and I graduated from NYU. There'll be offices in a city where we have too many offices. We don't know the future of the city. We don't know if we need any new offices, but they'll build new offices. We'll have more of these big box stores, so we'll look like any other city. It's becoming more and more like that. I've lived in Community Board 2 area for 71 years, and I've watched the development, and it's getting uglier and uglier. And NYU, I think, is the greatest danger that this poses, because they obviously have their eye on this, and I see what they've already done. Like a woman before me said, just look at the blossoming of the Zipper building on Mercer Street. We'll just get more of that. I'm sorry. It's out of the question. It's out of the question to do this.
Thank you, Anita. The next is Margaret Baisley.
Hi, my name is Margaret Baisley. I came to SoHo in 1979. I've owned a loft here for 30 years, but I'm not allowed to legally live in my loft because I'm not a certified artist. In fact, 99% of people who live here in SoHo can never be certified as artists, even artists that I've represented. We have a retail store in my building. It helps us pay the taxes. It helps us pay the outrageous repair bills. When is the zoning going to change? We want legal residential upstairs. We want legal retail downstairs. In my opinion, the zoning is broken and it needs to be fixed. For 20 years, we have asked city planning to rezone this area to make the zoning fit the use. This is not a manufacturing area anymore. We can't have manufacturing rules here. In my building, we have 28 units. We've got 2 artists. We were mostly middle class. We're not rich. We pay outrageous tax bills, and we're the ones who keep our landmark Singer sewing machine building in shape, maintained at our expense. It's not enough to stamp our feet and say no to the zoning plan. We want the zoning to fit the use. We want change. It can't be perfect. We know it isn't. It has details you may not like. But to stamp your feet and say no to zoning, no to new housing, no to inclusionary housing, no to change, no to construction, that's not the way that we're going to bring SoHo forward. In the proper context, with proper controls, new construction can be managed. Look at the building next to me, the Scholastic building. That was built on a site that had a 2-story lumber yard. Now it's a great asset to the community. No one is in favor of tearing down historic structures, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want legal zoning. It's time for a change.
Thank you, Margaret. Suzanne Sheen. After that's going to be Kathleen Wakeham, Pete Davies, Peter Lieberman, David Mulkins, Salvatore Francino, and Amelia Josephson. Suzanne, is Suzanne here? No, all right, so Kathleen, go ahead.
Oh, good evening. My name is Kathleen Wakeham of the Metropolitan Council on Housing. As a rent-stabilized tenant who has lived on the Lower East Side since 1973, I am very familiar with the needs of our community. Please reconsider the proposed plan of upzoning SoHo NoHo for 75% super luxury housing and 25% affordable housing plus commercial corridors. This upzoning is another giant giveaway to developers during de Blasio's lame duck year in office. Many are de Blasio donors who lobbied relentlessly for this giveaway. The plan would allow development of nearly 4 Empire State Buildings without an in-depth environmental analysis. Such development will incentivize the demolition of more than 600 units of rent-regulated housing. These units are occupied by low-income and Asian American residents. This rezoning will further incentivize secondary displacement of thousands more tenants in the surrounding area, which are much more disproportionately Asian American and low-income residents. Because of multiple loopholes which have no affordable housing requirements, little, if any, will be built. The plan includes office, hotel, and other commercial space, as well as luxury condo space and facility space for institutions like NYU, which are all exempt from affordable housing requirements. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on New Yorkers. Over 1 million New Yorkers have lost jobs and are facing eviction because of inability to pay rent. Over 70,000 New Yorkers are without stable homes. Our community does not need another upzoning for super luxury housing and commercial corridors. This plan will not provide or preserve needed housing. It will increase the housing crisis of New York.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Please vote down this rezoning. Thank you.
The next speaker is Pete Davies, followed by Peter Lieberman.
Good evening. My name is Pete Davies. Broadway Residents Coalition. I sat on the advisory group for many, many months. And one of the reasons that city planning got such a negative welcome tonight is because you were putting stuff up on the board that is not true. You wrote on the board that when a JLWQA unit is sold to a certified artist, that is not the law. There is no requirement that the sale be to a certified artist. So this is just one of the reasons. You had a chart that described the number of rent-stabilized units, and it said some. What does that mean, some? You're supposed to analyze and study the neighborhood. But you come here and you say, well, the number of rent-stabilized tenants is some. What the hell are we supposed to do with that? So that's why you got the welcome you got. Now, I have a couple of other questions. I know you've analyzed the finances of the new FAR, about 10 million square feet of buildable space being added. What is the value of the square foot of FAR? That's a question the community would like to know. Also, when you first calendared this plan to go before the City Planning Commission on May 3rd, but then withdrew it and didn't come back for 2 weeks, what was the reason that the Department of City Planning withdrew that application and laid it over?
Thanks, Pete. Next speaker is Peter Lieberman. Okay, I don't see Peter Lieberman. David Mulkins.
David Mulkins, Bowery Alliance of Neighbors. Can you hear me? Okay. How's that? These iconic historic districts contribute to the city's prosperity and allure. It was thus a shock that the mayor wanted to upzone such economically thriving, well-preserved historic destination points. Many at the time said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. When these hearings started, the mayor's forces kept insisting, we're going to do this right. We're going to work with and listen to the community. The community will determine where this goes. They also insisted, we're not talking about an upzoning. They used the community hearings as a cover, ignored its voices, and produced a predetermined upzoning plan that opens the floodgates to tall towers, NYU dorms, and big box stores. This plan also sets a terrible precedent for other historic districts to be decimated. Affordable housing does not require upzoning. Sufficiently large buildings with affordable housing can be built on underdeveloped lots right now. Upzoning the neighborhood for new development would in fact bring only a pittance of actual affordable units, 2 affordable units for every 8 luxury units. It is a sham to say that this is promoting affordability when it primarily benefits developers and politicians looking for campaign contributions. We support the community alternative plan, which includes significant affordable housing and protects residents, artists, small businesses, and the character of these historic districts.
Thank you, David. The next speaker is Salvatore Francino. I may be pronouncing that wrong. And then Amelia Josephson. Salvatore? Okay, I don't see Salvatore. Amelia?
Can you hear me? My name is Amelia Josephson. I support the rezoning. I support a city that is welcoming, that welcomes people to all neighborhoods, that welcomes new residents to SoHo, like my father's family was welcomed when they came to New York through Ellis Island. I think that is the spirit that we should be aspiring to as a city. We have places around the country where temperatures and climate change effects are extreme, where trans kids don't have their rights protected. We should be welcoming more people.
Can you please not interrupt?
We should be welcoming more people to New York City where they can thrive. We should be building integrated neighborhoods, and it's time for neighborhoods like SoHo and the Upper West Side and Tribeca and the Financial District to step up and do their part and take the pressure off of gentrifying neighborhoods in the outer boroughs and in Upper Manhattan, which is what this plan is all about. I also want to say that I'm very disappointed to see the conduct in today's meeting after so many months of virtual meetings. I think that this was an opportunity to come together, and the disrespect that was shown to volunteers on the community board and to public servants is really disgraceful, and I hope that the next meetings can have a much more elevated and civil tone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amelia. The next number of speakers are Sarah Soffer. Guys, we need to keep going. Sarah Soffer, Mickey McGee, Connie Murray, Michael McKee, Laura Sewell, and Kim Lippman. The next speaker is Sarah Soffer, Mickey McGee, I know I saw Mickey, Connie Murray, Michael McKee, Laura Sewell, and Kim Lippman. You guys could come up, anyone? Let's keep this moving. Whoever's in the front, just come on up and let us know who you are.
We're gonna keep going until we're finished, and we'll just need a few community board members who are able to just stay behind and help Z pack up. So thank you.
Everybody, if you could keep it brief if you can. But go ahead, next speaker, Mickey.
Yeah. Thanks, Carter. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for staying. I'm going to ask a really nerdy question because I think what's been said so far is very clear that this upzoning is a travesty. But I knew on October 7th that it was a travesty when I saw this map, and I'm sorry it's not big enough for you to see it. On the map, Spring Street subway is listed on Prince Street. Prince Street is listed as Spring Street, okay? They don't even know the street names in our neighborhood. But that's not the best part. The best part is this, is the next time I saw the perimeter, it looked like this. And there was something shaved off. And that little shaved off part is in my neighborhood, so I was interested. How'd we get out of this deal? Well, I pondered it for a while, and I'll show you. It's a little green area on this map. You probably can't see it. It's just at Watt Street, north of Watt, 3 partial blocks. I puzzled about it. Why? Why is this not included? And then I found the answer. And then I found the answer. Council District 3. This is the border of Council District 3. Our city council speaker did not want to have to weigh in on this. That is my hypothesis. Prove me wrong. And so my question for you is, what happened between October 7th, when this part of the neighborhood was included, and October 28th, when it was taken out? I want
Thank you,
that
Mickey.
information foiled.
Thank you, Mickey. So just to make sure, Sarah Soffer, I've called a few times. Are you here? No. Okay. Connie Murray.
My name is Connie Murray. I was born and raised in Manhattan, lived in SoHo for a few years, 30 years ago, and have been living in Long Island City, Queens for almost a quarter century now. I'm a writer and I advocate for cheap housing, not the scammy, affordable housing offered in the proposed SoHo NoHo rezoning. I am here tonight to speak about pro-development group Open New York, this self-funded vanity project, which was featured in the Daily News' recent piece on SoHo as a rezoning wolf in sheep's clothing. Open New York hates SoHo NoHo. They hate the buildings, they hate the beauty, they hate the history, they even infamously hate the sunlight here. They hate this community board. They want to abolish it and replace it with themselves. And they hate the residents of SoHo. They want SoHo residents to pay for the audacity of creating an extraordinary, globally recognized neighborhood. Open New York's contempt is an off-putting, deliberate distraction from the reality that their proposal is baseless, gratuitous, and threatens hundreds of already existing low-income homes while not being able to guarantee that even 1 unit of affordable housing would be produced in their stead. Open New York is the loudest voice for rezoning SoHo NoHo. It's also the loneliest voice, as demonstrated yesterday by Christopher Marte's resounding victory. Open New York and its hatred of this community will not prevail here. Not in our backyard, gentlemen.
Thank you, Connie. And next we have Michael McKee. Following Michael, we have Laura Sewell and Kim Littman.
Good evening. My name is Michael McKee. I'm the treasurer of the Tenants Political Action Committee. I'm here to testify on behalf of Tenants PAC against the SoHo NoHo upzoning. We believe that every neighborhood, including affluent neighborhoods, must accept greater density to accommodate affordable housing. But this plan is not that plan. This plan will not really produce affordable housing. Now, you're all very intelligent people, and you can read the plan yourself and analyze it, but I want to focus on one aspect, which is the target that this plan puts on the backs of those tenants living in rent-regulated and loft law-protected housing. You cannot approve a plan that is going to result in people being displaced, supposedly in the name of producing additional affordable housing down the road. It is not sufficient for city planning simply to poo-poo this concern and to say, oh, it's not going to happen. The one area of loopholes in the rent laws that the state legislature did not close 2 years ago when they repealed vacancy control and made many other changes was demolition. Demolition is still a mechanism landlords can use to evict tenants out of rent-stabilized housing in order to tear the building down. This is something that you simply must keep in mind. It's also pretty rich for me to sit here tonight and hear city planning talk about the lack of city-owned housing in SoHo where you could build 100% affordable housing, when city planning and de Blasio in other neighborhoods have given away city-owned housing, most notably the Bedford Union Armory in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, which was a missed opportunity where you could have actually built 100% affordable housing. So I'm urging you to vote this plan down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That's Michael McKee from Tenants Back. Thanks for coming down tonight. I'm just going to call out a few more names so people are ready. Laura Sewell, Kim Lipman, Danny Salas, Dan Miller, not the CB2 Dan Miller, Lee Beneke, Michelle Campo, Michelle Varian, and Dominic Sunkowski. I may be mispronouncing that. Laura?
Good evening. I'm Laura Sewell, a Vice President of the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, also known as LESPI. LESPI strongly opposes the mayor's plan to upzone SoHo, NoHo, and parts of Chinatown. If approved, this plan would allow buildings to be built up to 2.5 times larger than what is currently permitted, destroying the character of these historic neighborhoods and setting a dangerous precedent for other neighborhoods throughout the city. Included in these neighborhoods are some of the city's most popular historic districts. The plan as it now exists would dramatically alter the scale within these districts. It would allow the proliferation of even more big box chain stores, making it even more difficult for small, independent, and family-owned businesses to survive. While this upzoning plan is presented as a means to promote affordable housing, the specifics of the plan belie that claim. There are no provisions for explicitly middle and low-income residents. Instead, the plan promises to make neighborhoods less affordable, less neighborly, and less hospitable. LESPI and many other local community organizations support the community rezoning plan for SoHo NoHo. This plan would help create more affordable housing for the area while maintaining the neighborhood character that so many residents, businesses, and visitors cherish. The livability of New York City lies in its neighborhoods and their distinctive qualities. This is what draws prospective residents to New York and what draws tourists to visit. Our historic districts and neighborhoods are not only characterized by beautiful, irreplaceable architecture, but typically are at a low scale that allows for light and air, particularly important in times of a pandemic. We respectfully urge CB2 to defend New York City neighborhoods and oppose the SoHo NoHo neighborhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. The next speaker is Kim Lipman, followed by Danny Salas and Dan Miller.
Hi, my name is Kim Lipman. I have lived in SoHo for 16 years. I've come to many of these meetings in the past to make my voice heard about, different changes and plans that were upcoming in the neighborhood. I have been on my condo board in 2 different buildings for, the entirety of the time that I've lived here. So I definitely embrace the responsibilities that every resident has to this style of dense living. Like everyone needs to help out and have some responsibility and try to share their voice. When I hear what so many people have to say, I think it really reflects the feeling of not having been able to have a voice in this process, not really. conducting so much of this process over Zoom was, not conducive to people feeling like they were able to have a voice and like they were able to, understand what their fellow community members were feeling. It feels like this process box-checked requirements and misrepresented the intent of the process during that. And, and I'd like to say I've been, open-minded towards this. I think that, having gone to some of the focus groups during the early part of this process, it felt like maybe there could have been a positive outcome here. I think people were open to certain changes, but I think it's sad that this is happening to a historic district. Really sad. I mean, that we're even talking about upzoning under the guise of affordable housing is just strange.
Thanks, Kim. The next speaker is Denny Salas. Bob, can you please figure out what's going on over here? Gormley, can you just come over here? Something's happening over here. Can you just figure that out? We're going to keep going. Denny Salas.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I'm very supportive of the rezoning of NoHo and SoHo, and there's a few reasons why. One, there is a 700,000 affordable housing shortfall in New York City, and the only way that we're going to be able to solve this crisis is by allowing more housing be built all across the city. And two, there are flaws within the plan. One of them is the commercial density allowance. That is a little too high, and that's not going to encourage builders to actually create the affordable housing that's necessary for families to experience upward socioeconomic mobility. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if you lower the commercial density allowance. Another aspect of the plan that needs to be corrected is the community preference. I do believe that there should be another carve-out for families that were actually affected by COVID. Nearly 4,000 kids lost their parents during COVID, New York City families. And those kids should have access to some of the best schools that exist here in New York City. And one thing that we can do is create that preference within that plan itself. That's it. All right, thank you, everybody.
Dan Miller. Dan, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dan Miller. I'm here to speak in support of the rezoning, which, as others have said, isn't perfect. The commercial densities are too high, and we should lower them, or even better, increase the residential density allowed so that we can ensure that we build the most housing possible. But more broadly, I want to talk about the level that we're making this decision at. We are here in a meeting that is attended almost entirely either by SoHo residents, but y'all aren't the only people affected by this decision, right? The people who want to live here but can't because it costs $8,000 for an apartment actually do matter. Also, not only that, but you all are filtering the attendance even more by recklessly and loudly booing anyone who speaks in agreement. Okay, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So I'd like to ask Community Board 2 what plans you have for future meetings to ensure that they don't devolve into this kind of abuse, insults, and name calling. Because like,
all right, thanks, guys. Let's get back on topic here so we can address the rezoning plan that's before us.
No, that's an actual genuine question, because this is clearly like not how we should be running a meeting. And you think it's bad. I'm only here for 2 minutes. DCP had to deal with this for a half hour. I feel honestly ashamed for my city, and I'd like you guys to take some steps to bring everyone, all the opponents, under control.
Thanks. I think there are a lot of different opinions here tonight, so we'll move on. The next speaker is Lee Beneke, followed by Michelle Campo, Michelle Varian, and Dominic Sandkowski. All right, thanks. Lee, you're up.
Hi, I'm going to be really fast. I had a whole speech, but that was a long time ago, and I know you guys want to get out of here. I've been in SoHo for 45 years. I'm committed to SoHo. I thank you all very much for the possibility of speaking to you about this tonight.
Go closer to the mic.
Closer to the mic. Okay, everybody can hear me. So what I want to say right now is just please turn this plan down. We're not against affordable housing. I don't have a fight with these people. But this plan is not the right plan. It really disenfranchises so many of us in so many ways. I think that's been covered tonight. So just please, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Michelle Campo.
I'm going to be really brief, hopefully. Okay, I live in an area, it's called Little Italy. It's also a special Little Italy district, so I guess Vicky Bean would really hates us. And it was made by the community. It's a special district made by the community and of the community, and it works. This is not. This is another destructive de Blasio plan. And all I have to say is that Robert Moses would be so proud of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next speaker is Michelle Varian.
Can you hear me? So I am a 25-year resident of SoHo, and I live with my artist-certified husband, who is able to make his work in our loft. I started my business in SoHo. I was able to start in my loft and then move into a storefront, grow my business, employ people. I carry the work of over 100 other designers and manufacturers in the city. So I really contribute to the economic health of the city overall and the creative fabric of the city. And I'm very proud of that. And I'd like to think that with a readjustment of the speculative real estate market in the neighborhood, there could be opportunity again for small businesses, for creative people to start and actually grow things here. It's not too late, and I'd like to see that be a possibility for more people. Regarding this upzoning plan, one of the things that really has to be pushed back on is the fact that an environmental study was done during a pandemic. Firstly, the world has changed. There are a huge number of people who will forever be working from home. You talk about a transit-rich district. What does that matter if people are working from home? That no longer matters. We are talking and applying all kinds of values and models that are 20 years old and no longer relevant. We need to start over, look at this new world. It is a new world. We really, really need to consider all of the things that have changed. And let's see, lots of things besides no transit. There are tons of offices that now are very likely never going to be as densely occupied as they previously were. Let's talk about converting those to create affordable housing. What about all of the hotels that have turned in their keys and are being foreclosed upon? Those are opportunities for the cities to purchase those buildings and convert them to affordable housing.
Thank you, Michelle. Next speaker is Dominic.
Hi, I'm Dominic Sandkowski, speaking for Welcome to Chinatown, a nonprofit supporting Chinatown small businesses. Contrary to the SoHo, NoHo moniker of this rezoning, it also affects Chinatown both directly in the southeasternmost part and indirectly in the rezoned areas, as the rezoned area's direct neighbor. First, we are concerned about the displacement of working-class Chinatown residents. The R10 upzoning in the Chinatown area will create a massive incentive to push out tenants in order to sell to developers, and certain landlords in the area have demonstrated unprincipled greed before. If rezoning proceeds, Welcome to Chinatown supports the Cooper Square Committee's demand for anti-harassment provisions in the rezoning text and substantial funding to groups like CAV to enforce anti-harassment, especially for vulnerable non-English speakers. Second, the new affordable units will not benefit working-class Chinatown residents. Even if preference for affordable units is extended to Chinatown residents as well as SoHos, the lowest income target proposed on the city's rezoning FAQ, $40,690 for a family of 3, is not enough to benefit working-class Chinese Americans being the ethnic group with the highest poverty rate in New York City. Any rezoning must require more affordable units at lower target incomes. Otherwise, new affordable housing will be unaffordable for Chinatown. Lastly, we are concerned about the allowance for over 10,000 square feet of commercial space as of right. SoHo's current ad hoc permitting system, yes, does need reform for commercial use, but we should not build more spaces for big box stores that engage in unfair competition and hurt small businesses, especially not at a time when small businesses are hurting across New York City and especially in Chinatown. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. I had neglected to read the next speakers, so I'm going to read out a number. Sean Sweeney, David Lawrence, Margot Margolis, Will Thomas, Zella Jones, Jane Fisher, Susan Brindle, Jeannie Wilkie, and Sunny Ning. So, all right. So, does anybody come on up? If I've called your name, you can just come up and keep speaking. We've got a lot more names to call, so. Come on up. Just.
Thanks for letting me speak. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm David Lawrence. I'm a photographer and a AIR certified artist. I live and work in a loft on Grand Street, and I live and work in a loft on Grand Street, and I'm 100% against this plan as it's written. It's a blueprint for turning other neighborhoods around the city into cookie-cutter copies of Midtown. Look at what NYU is doing. I believe that the giveaways to developers in NYU are so generous that they'll obliterate this neighborhood. I've lived here for over 30 years. The fig leaves that the city is shaking around to try to cover up the theft of our neighborhood are the twin premises of more affordable housing, supposedly, and a dubious arts fund. The affordable housing aspect will never happen because there's so many massive loopholes for developers to exploit. However, the luxury apartments and offices that will indeed go up will block the sunshine that tourists love and that personally my photography depends on. And it'll displace hundreds of lower income neighbors who I live very close to, as well as drive out more small businesses and all the artists. To add insult to injury, the DPC wants me personally to pay $350,000 if I can't take it to live here anymore, or if I want to bequeath my loft to my children. It's going to cost me $350,000 to give it to my kids, to give my own loft away. They want the artists like me to fund their artists' extortion fund, which the city will then use to bribe any arts organizations that remain to support the destruction of this unique historic neighborhood. Please start over and listen to the people this time.
Thanks, David. For those who are having conversations in the back, can you guys either sit down or go outside because the acoustics in here are terrible. So, Jeannie.
Hi, Jeannie Wilkie from the NoHo Neighborhood Association. Thank you. I've heard the word sham and scam so many times that I'm not going to make my technical points. I'll send them in. And I will repeat what I said outside when we had a very well-attended press conference where you were setting up. It was a famous con man, George C. Parker, who sold the Brooklyn Bridge to gullible Marks on false promises. Now it is the mayor and city planning acting as the con man, not only selling the community false promises, but acting as the obvious front man for large real estate and campaign donor interests. The city's plan must be scrapped. They need to go back to the drawing board. Instead of trying to con us anymore by pretending to listen to us, but instead dismissing us, the city must commit to working hand in hand with the community, starting with our community alternative community plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Susan Brindle, Will Thomas. Will, I see you over there. You want to come up?
Thank you, Carter. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Thomas. I live in the East Village, and I'm here to support the proposed rezoning as the executive director of Open New York, an independent, grassroots, pro-housing organization. Allowing more homes here will help to alleviate New York's housing shortage and help to fight displacement in other neighborhoods. That said, there are a few small changes which we would recommend. First, the commercial densities are too high and could risk offices being built instead of housing. Office density should be lowered. The city should also expand the community preference policy to ensure that the rezoning is a force for racial and socioeconomic integration. Finally, the city should mandate the deepest affordability option of MIH. Furthermore, a few facts for the community board to consider. New York has a terrible housing shortage, and if you vote against this proposal, you will be making it worse. Between 2010 and 2017, median rents went up by more than double median wages. There are more people homeless today than at the height of the Great Depression. Pre-COVID, 1 out of every 10 elementary school students in New York City public schools attended from homeless shelters. So again, if you vote against this proposal and deny 900 families an affordable home zoned for the best public schools in the city, I hope you have a better reason than sheer aesthetics. It is also worth remembering that residential construction in SoHo and NoHo has been illegal as of right since the 1960s, which has pushed demand for market rate housing into all the surrounding neighborhoods, raising rents and causing displacement. Building more market rate housing in SoHo and NoHo will put this process into reverse and should be welcomed by anyone who claims to care about rising rents or displacement. At the end of the day, the argument for rezoning SoHo and NoHo is one for equity. The de Blasio administration has not rezoned any wealthy white neighborhoods for new housing growth, so rezoning SoHo and NoHo would mark a significant shift towards these neighborhoods allowing their fair share of construction. Almost half of all construction is concentrated in just 10 neighborhoods, in either fast gentrifying neighborhoods like Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, or Mott Haven, or formerly non-residential neighborhoods like downtown Brooklyn, LIC, and the Far West Side. More equitable development would ask more of wealthy neighborhoods like SoHo.
Thank you, Will. I'm just going to call out some names. I know a number of people were here. I did see them, but Susan Brindle, are you here? Okay. Margot Margolis? No. Zella? Zella, are you still here? No. Sean, you're just in time. Come on up. Zella, I don't see you. Okay. Jane Fisher? Sean, walk faster. Sunny. No Sunny. Okay. Vicky Papadias. Sean, you're up. Come on. All right. While Sean's walking up, let me call off a number of names. Vicky Papadias, Samir Lavingia, Paul Tashinkle, Alec Newstein, Brian Chadwick, Roger Manning, Aaron Marks, Darlene Lutz, Carol Steen. If I've called your name, please come on up. Sean?
Ready?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Sean Sweeney. I'm the director of the SoHo Alliance. And I was, thank you. And I was a member of the Envision SoHo Advisory Group. And I want to ask you, Sylvia, you know, not once did we talk about high-rise buildings going up or big box stores going in. We never talked. And affordable housing just came in at the very last moment. We spent hours on just getting residential living legalized and retail living. I'm asking you a question for the community board. Where do you come up with the rest of this stuff? Where did that come from? For the record, no response. Okay. Anyway, my time's running. Because there's 16,000 pages to read, and you know what you're doing. You're keeping that away from us so we cannot comment. But we did find something which I really want to report to this committee. Robert Seidman could not make it here tonight. Robert Seidman is a plaintiff in a very precedent-setting case. His landlord, Schwartz versus Simon, tried to get him out because he was going to, he said he needed it for his own family. If this $100 fee goes into effect, this flip tax, landlords will gladly pay a couple of $100,000 to get a rent-stabilized tenant out. No one seems to have done this. You have never brought this up.
Every landlord who has a rent stabilizer or a loft tenant will gladly pay $250,000 to get a tenant in there who will pay $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year. In 2 years, I'll have it amortized. And this rezoning is going to cause the dispossession and the displacement and the eviction of hundreds of tenants. How do you address that? Did you not realize this? Did you not realize the court case?
Thank you, Sean. You're up next. If you could just state your name.
My name's Aaron Marks. I live in Bushwick, but I worked in SoHo for several years before the pandemic. I have delivered probably several $100,000 worth of furniture to SoHo and NoHo residents' lofts. I've seen their wealth and power and entitlement, just as I've seen it on display here in the constant shouts of "Where do you live?" I think people know what that means. We've heard complaints about the services and infrastructure in the community. I would ask people to go look at outer borough neighborhoods and see what the services are that are available there. I see this as a community trying to pull the ladder up behind them and monopolize billions of dollars in infrastructure and public investment, and I hope that you don't let them.
Thanks, Aaron. Next person, Darlene. And if we could just keep this moving, we're getting there, we're getting to the end, but if we could just keep this moving and get done, I think that
Good evening, everybody. I thought I'd be talking to a full room, although I've been talking quite a bit. I'll make it quick, all right? And I'm addressing all of you, right? This plan must be rejected. It cannot be fixed. It's clear there was never an intention to fix it. I've lived in SoHo for over 40 years, and in this town for more. The politics are dirty and corrupt to the core, so it's no surprise that every mendacious trick would be trotted out to win public sentiment. And I believe that this has become a battle in the public. We have a groupie group coming here and harassing us about where we live. I think you know what I'm talking about, right? And what I'd like to know is what media consultant has the DCP been working with and the city to form and create a really destructive message? Do I need to spell it out? Okay, I will. Well, there's not much left here of the rich white racists that we've been targeted as. And that's been spoon-fed to an obsequious media. We didn't count on being slandered. We thought you were going to play fair. We're opposing this because it's a boondoggle, and you know it. 900 units of mixed income housing. 2 weeks ago, it was affordable housing. Now your message is mixed income.
Thanks, Darlene.
Okay, you guys. Just reminder, let's not get personal in terms of specific speakers. We have heard a number of questions tonight, and given the large number of people that showed up, we are going to get everyone testifying. And then tomorrow night, when we will be on Zoom, which if you can't make it, it will be live streamed and recorded so you can watch it at your leisure. We will ask city planning many of the questions we're hearing tonight. If you have more questions, I'm sorry, we're not on Zoom, it's not as easy. Please send your questions to sohonoho@cb2manhattan.org. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a number of people I called. You just come in, state your name. Yep.
My name, but thank you. I'm Chris Ryan. I'm husband of Allie Ryan, who is running for City Council District 2, and she couldn't be here, but I figured I could speak for both of us. We are both against the proposed plan. We view its sole emphasis on affordable housing as a means to increase density in an already dense area. We do support the SoHo community plan. This is the plan that should be on the table tonight. The overdevelopment has been fast-tracked by de Blasio administration to meet the housing crisis, which we agree we do need more affordable housing. But empty storefronts and the unsold, unrented luxury inventory show that the market is changed. It's stagnant. The pandemic has revealed a lot of new realities, and we do not think that this plan will address them. We look forward to working with District 1, District 2. Part of NoHo is in District 2. We're looking forward to working with District 3, I meant to say. And yeah, thank you for having us speak here. I'm Chris Ryan, and I'm speaking for my surrogate there, Allie Ryan. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to just read off some names. Samir Lavingia, Vicky Papadias, Paul Schinkel, Alex Newstein, Brian Chadwick, and Roger Manning, and Carol Steen.
Hi, can you hear me? All right. Sorry? It's good. All right. My name is Samir Lavingia. Thank you for calling on me, and thank you for being here. I'm here to speak in support of the rezoning. The main issue that I wanted to bring up that I don't think other people have brought up yet is simply that the average New Yorker has 30% of the carbon footprint of the average American, and by getting as many people as we can to live in New York, we are going to help save the planet. We need as many people living in dense, urban, metropolitan areas, not in sprawling suburbs. Building all types of housing will allow more people to live here. And it's imperative to make sure that we are able to save the planet for the future. SoHo is one of the whitest neighborhoods in Manhattan, or in New York City. And it just has an incredible amount of segregation. If we want to desegregate our city and integrate it properly, like we should be building as much affordable housing as possible.
Guys, if you could just keep it down, please. Go ahead,
Asking
Samir.
people of color to move to Harlem will not integrate our city. We need to get people of color like myself to live all over the city. Having segregated neighborhoods is not good for the country, not good for the city, and it's not good for anyone. We need to integrate our neighborhoods. We need to integrate our schools. We need to get as many people living in every single different neighborhood. That's why the plan that has been proposed focuses on integrating different socioeconomic classes, and I'm very happy that they are focusing on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Samir. Vicky? Do we have, is Vicky here? Vicky Papadias, okay. Paul Schinkel? Alex Newstein?
Can everybody hear me? Louder, is this better? Okay. I'm Alex Newstein. I've lived in SoHo for 9 years, and my family has lived in SoHo for over 40 years. I feel exhausted and scared and sad that we who live here must now defend this community from being handed over, like so many others, by the mayor's office and the DLP to real estate developers and retail conglomerates under the shameless and cynical guise of affordable housing. Shame on them. Our city really does need affordable housing. Over the last 10 years, the city gained 100,000 new housing units, but lost 400,000 housing units that rent for $1,000 or less. I'll say that again. The city gained 100,000 new housing units over the last 10 years, but lost 400,000 units that rent for $1,000 or less. Building up, like some here have proposed, without actually protecting low income, displaces regular people. As a lifelong New Yorker and longtime SoHo resident, I've seen what we all know. Glass high-rise developments are a cynical and ugly lie. They do nothing to provide affordable housing for people who need it. What they actually do is enrich the real estate developer elite and the politicians they support at the expense of everyone else. I call on this board to aid those whom de Blasio has abandoned. Help our people, support the organic growth of real neighborhood communities, don't help destroy us. Please don't give SoHo the same fate as the Meatpacking District, the Williamsburg Waterfront, the Fulton Market in Brooklyn, or the Long Island City Waterfront. Thank you.
I'm just going to call on a number of other speakers. Brian Chadwick is next, Roger Manning, Carol Steen, Steve Herrick, Diane Welton, Denise Martin, and Jacqueline Tabinski. Am I saying that? No. I can't read your handwriting. I'm sorry. Tobolov, sorry.
My name is Brian Chadwick. And what really frustrates me and worries me is actually broader than what we're talking about here in SoHo. It's actually the great and tragic homogenization of American culture. You know when you go to see other cities and you visit other towns and you come back and you go, man, thank God I live in New York. Do you ever feel that? I feel that. Do you want to come to SoHo and go out to dinner in a 2,000 table Red Lobster? Would you like to come to SoHo and go with your girlfriend on a romantic date at the Olive Garden with 40,000 square feet? Do you want to come to SoHo looking for a treasured gift or a piece of art and buy it at Nobody Beats the Fucking Whiz? Cities all over the world, big cities and small cities, are trying to create what we have already in SoHo. They're taking their industrial buildings and they're turning them into residents for creative people, artists, architects, engineers who are doing new digital things, wonderful things with their computer technology. They're trying to do what we already have. And you people have to be careful not to destroy our great city. Please don't do it. You know, I've never been to a city hall meeting before. This is the first time I've done this. And I'm not even American. I can't vote. But I'm so angry that our government would hand over one of the great assets of our city to developers who are perfectly happy to destroy it. Please don't do this. I want to look you in the eye and say, don't do this. Go and see what Detroit is like. Go and see. You know why tourists don't go to Dallas or Houston? Because there's nothing fucking there. Tourists come here because we have a treasure. Don't ruin it, please.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for attending your first community board meeting. Next speaker is Roger Manning, Carol Steen. If you guys could keep it down in the back. Steve Herrick. Steve, are you? Yep. And after Steve is Diane Welton, Denise Martin, and Jacqueline Tobolov.
Hi, I'm Steve Herrick, Executive Director of Cooper Square Committee. I'm here to oppose the ULURP application for SoHo and NoHo. It will create an out-of-scale upzoning that doesn't provide meaningful protections for rent-regulated tenants in loft and tenement buildings, which will contribute to widespread tenant harassment and displacement. Cooper Square Committee works to preserve and develop affordable housing in the East Village and Lower East Side. And while we support the concept of mandatory inclusionary housing, we believe this rezoning is flawed in many ways, such as the following. City planning has identified a few dozen soft sites where it projects the rezoning will result in over 3,000 mixed-income housing units under MIH, but the massive upzoning to residential FARs in most of the study area to 9.7 and 12.0 will in fact create many more soft sites that city planning hasn't identified in its EIS. Many small buildings that currently house low and moderate income rent-regulated tenants will be demolished and replaced with much larger 80-20 buildings. So there'll be no net increase in low-income housing in SoHo and NoHo. As others said, the rezoning also contains loopholes that will put many buildings in the historic districts at risk of enlargement, damaging the unique character of the community. For example, city planning will not require that low-income housing be built on-site for developments under 25,000 square feet. City planning doesn't propose to include any language in the zoning text amendment to prohibit demolition of structurally sound rent-regulated buildings. It doesn't propose to include SoHo and NoHo in the Certificate of No Harassment program, which would require developers to sign affidavits that they haven't harassed tenants in the last 5 years. It doesn't disqualify property owners who harass tenants from demolishing their buildings and getting a permit to build a new one. Other rezonings, such as in West Clinton, Hudson Yards, and Williamsburg, have included some or all of these anti-harassment and anti-demolition provisions. If these provisions existed, it would at least be possible for groups like CAV to organize tenants to enforce their rights to stay in their homes. All right, so anyway, I just want to urge you to vote no. Thank you.
And so, Steve, I just want, just so everybody knows, your Cooper Square Committee was a member of the Envision Advisory Group, and
Right.
your group is against the proposed rezoning? Is
That's
that
right.
correct? All right, thank you very much. Diane Welton. Denise Martin. Denise, are you still here? No? Jacqueline. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. I couldn't read your handwriting.
Hi, everyone. I think that there's been a referendum, and the majority of people do not want this. And it seems like that this is a land grab. NYU has 111 buildings. That's great if they want more, but the people, the constituents, do not want this. And the other big problem is that I guess the constituents are very angry with this group here, the de Blasio group, but the bottom line is, de Blasio didn't act alone. He had help from a very neglectful city council member. And I think it's time we start voting in new people and stop with this uniparty, because we keep getting the same stuff. And it's not rich against poor or this against that. It's the uniparty. And they always go against what the constituents want. And we keep voting them in and expecting something different. Let's not vote for the same people that keep giving us the same crap. SoHo is 100 times worse now than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And we keep voting for the same people, blaming the same people. We vote them in. Let's stop voting them in. November 2nd, new election. Let's stop voting in the uniparty.
All right, I'm going to read out all the rest of the names. So this is it. Sante, you're up next. Sante Scardillo, followed by Kay Romeo, Dr. Tom Legata, Casey Berkowitz, Vittoria Fariello, Kel Friedman, Victoria Hellstrom, Renee Monrose, Robert Dawson, having trouble reading this name, Vadim, last name starts with a G, Doug Handel, all right, and then Ken A. So if you've heard your names, please come on up. Sante, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Sante Scardillo from the Little Italy Neighbors Association. I live in Little Italy for 40 years this year, which, by the way, it's an entity that exists in the zoning test and is not, like Nolita, something that happens in the pages of New York Times and Vogue magazine. I had some prepared remarks.
Sante, can you hold on just a second? If there's anybody in the back, can you just make sure the door is closed? All right.
I had some prepared remarks, but I would like to address the way this meeting has been happening more than run. Perhaps the next time, instead of 40 minutes of a rambling, quote, presentation that was dripping contempt for the residents, explaining to them the neighborhood they don't even know, because we've seen they don't know the names of the street. So do your homework first. And perhaps the community board should give them 15 minutes with time for questions, because it's a shame that then the residents are limited to only 2 minutes to counter what they are rambling on. And by the way, this is a strategy, because look at how full the room is. Who's hearing what I'm saying? Where are the cameras? Everything is gone because they took so long. So the powerless, us, when they feel slighted, of course they eventually talk back, because we have no recourse. So of course you got a little bit of what this community feels about what you're trying to perpetrate against us. And I hope you listen to the people tonight. And tomorrow night, maybe you can do something a little more cohesive and a little more respectful for the people who have built this neighborhood, that have built the city. And it's not just a good fortune, like one of the shields said before. I had to fight for my rent-stabilized apartment so many times in court. So far, the balance of power is in my favor. I
All right,
built a
Sante,
neighborhood
your time's up.
association, and everything is going well. But the next time, who knows? I also would like to say
Sante,
that,
we're
no,
gonna
just
have to
one
move on.
last thing. NYU, like all charity that are developers, should lose their nonprofit status. And unfortunately,
All right. Thanks, Sante. Feel free to email. You've got our email, so thank you. Kay Romeo? Is it Karen Romeo? Okay, not here. Dr. Tom Legata?
I'm ready. Test. Hello. Hello, distinguished chair and committee members. My name is Dr. Tom Legata, and I am an executive member of the Downtown Independent Democrats and a co-representative from DID to the Chinatown Working Group, which CBTU was involved in the creation of. I'm a former resident of Greenwich Village in Chinatown and an active Democratic County Committee member from the Lower East Side. While I live personally outside of the direct impact area, my neighbors in Chinatown and the Lower East Side are very concerned of the speculative impact of this zoning plan on our districts, causing displacement, increased rents, and increased property taxes. They say we should be building affordable housing at public land like 5 World Trade Center and converting empty commercial storefronts to affordable housing, not subsidizing luxury developments filled with 80% wealthy, mostly white residents. If the city really wants diversity and affordable housing, then please eminent domain some luxury condos and put NYCHA housing on the spot. My question to the chair: how does CB2 support and cultivate community-led zoning plans such as the SoHo NoHo Alternative Community Plan and the Chinatown Working Group Plan? Or are we here to rubber stamp giveaways to developers so that Mr. de Blasio can have a cushy real estate job when he leaves office? And I just finally want to say congratulations to Christopher Marte and Gail Brewer on their commanding first round leads in the council primaries. We ask that the current and future council members vote no on this plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Renee? Renee? Oh, Renee, you're up. And Zee, thank you very much for your help tonight. You're doing a great job. We definitely could not have done it without you.
Hi, my name is Renee Monrose. I'm a resident of 542 Broadway, a member of the Broadway Residents Coalition. Can you hear me all right? I'm a I am also an artist and have lived and worked in my law for 35 years. I'm going to repeat some question I asked at the board last time, but this time I get the pleasure of asking them directly to the Department of City Planning. The DCP's solution to the JLWQA legalization mechanism is the proposed loft conversion fee to be levied on residential loft tenants at a rate of $100 per square foot. This mechanism raises countless red flags, but my questions are these. Did DCP ever do an analysis for the actual number of JLWQA units for which that loft conversion fee mechanism would be applicable? How much money will that fee actually generate over the 10-year time span covered under the DCP plan? And finally, for commercial properties, which are being granted conversion to as-of-right uses, what is the conversion fee for them? We deserve better. This plan is unfixable, and Community Board 2 must reject it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Renee. Casey Berkowitz?
Hi there.
My name is Casey Berkovitz. I'm a Chelsea resident just across the 14th Street border in CV4, but I do commute through here quite often, and I work in Community District 1, so I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, that both in the rezoning neighborhood and that folks say would be affected. I want to urge you to support this plan. I'll be honest, my hopes are not high, but I hope that you will consider future generations of both New York City and the planet. Living in SoHo and NoHo is one of the lowest carbon activities that you can do in the United States. It has excellent transit access. Very few people drive. For the sake of all of Lower Manhattan not being underwater by the end of my lifetime, I urge you to allow more people to live here and not in car-intensive outer boroughs or even Houston, Atlanta, or Phoenix, where they're almost guaranteed to drive. Secondly, I want to remind everybody that New York City is the vibrant, beautiful city that we love because it has grown and changed over time. The way to build new, growing neighborhoods is to allow them to grow naturally and not freeze them in amber. At the very least, for the sake of future generations, perhaps even your children, I urge you to build a more affordable, vibrant, and growing city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Douglas Hanow. Am I pronouncing that right?
Hello, my name is Douglas Hanow. I'm a father of 2 teenage daughters. I'm a lifelong New York City resident, public school graduate, sent my kids to public schools. I am very worried about my teenage daughters and their generation's access to live in neighborhoods like SoHo, NoHo, because they're way too expensive. There's not enough housing, and we need to build more affordable, more luxury. My children care about climate change. The way to fight climate change is with density and with transit-rich neighborhoods like SoHo, NoHo, which is incredibly amazing place to live, and more young people like my children and like the children of immigrants and like the children of people who will never get a chance to do anything but look at very expensive retail stores instead of actually living in an affordable apartment in this beautiful community. So I urge you as a lifelong New Yorker to please pass this rezoning. I think it's going to be an amazing thing for New York City, and we're going to all welcome more neighbors and more people into this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas. Ken A. Next, Ken A. No Ken A. Okay. Victoria Ferriello. Okay. Carol Friedman. I think she left. Victoria, you're up. Victoria Hellstrom.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Hello? Is that working? Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Hellstrom. I'm here today to speak. Hello? Is that better? Hi, my name is Victoria Hellstrom. I'm here today to speak for the loft tenants in Tribeca. We have heard from community after community that nobody wants a repeat of Tribeca after 9/11, when Tribeca was rezoned, and Mayor Bloomberg altered the loft laws to force creatives in fashion, film, entertainment, music, and the arts from their lofts with absolute horror stories and in industrial zones across the city, and built a shed. Where there were innocent women and children in these buildings forced to the streets with accidents and fires, buildings with big red X's the city falsely claimed were no longer safe to enter, the city illegally vacated, evacuated, and or demolished, where many of the business records were falsified. Now loft buildings sit vacant all over Tribeca that are rent-stabilized buildings as a matter of law. It's important to understand that the mayor's office failed to put many loft buildings into rent stabilization as required by law across the city for decades. When lofts represent a class of housing for affordable live workspace, tenants in fashion, film, music, entertainment, and the arts repurposed from buildings formerly used for manufacturing, to affordable live workspace under Loft Law Article 7C, impacting design and architecture around the world in a path to home ownership, where the loft laws support entire industries. I have 5 questions. My first question is, why DCP failed to do any real displacement studies when rezoning clearly represents an incredible loss of affordable units, as we have seen across the city since Mayor Bloomberg. My second question is what DCP intends to do to prevent building fraud rampant in Tribeca, where many of the business records have been falsified, just like the Kushner
Victoria,
building fraud.
your time is up, unfortunately.
I have
Yep.
I actually just have 2 more. If the city was truly concerned with affordable housing, why not put every affordable unit the loft laws created into rent stabilization first? Why DCP hasn't concerned themselves with the impact of fashion, film, entertainment, and music, or specialty retail? And finally, why you have no non-eviction plan? I would very much like my questions to be answered.
Thank you, Victoria.
SoHo
And so you're the 89th speaker, or the 89th name I've called, and we had a number of people had left. The last 2 are Robert Dawson and Vadim, and I can't pronounce the last names. That's it. Okay. So we are finished with the public speaking session. I'm going to turn it back over to Anita.
Thank you, everyone, for your testimony. I don't think this is working. I think we should adjourn. I mean, we're not going to do an executive.
Should we thank City Planning and Anthony?
Oh, so you should be doing that. I just want to thank Sylvia and City Planning for your presentation and for staying and listening, and that's very good. Thank you. And who else am I?
And Anthony. And Anthony,
I
thank
can't
you
see.
for staying through the end.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And just a reminder, tomorrow night, we're back on Zoom, so if you'd like, if you didn't have a chance to hear City Planning's presentation, they'll be doing it again, so it should be able to hear it more clearly, and or we may not do it, but that's we'll see. That's what.
And it's a time to ask questions
And also feel free to submit written statements. We welcome those, and if your buildings have written statements, we welcome those.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.